Um, This is January 26, 2015, and a regular board meeting of the Board of Education, District 64. Vicki, would you please take a roll call? We know in advance that Dathan has already asked to be excused from tonight's meeting.
Dan Collins.
Here.
Scott Zimmerman.
Here.
Tony Borelli.
Here.
Vicki Lee is here. John Heidi.
Here.
Bob Johnson.
Here. There's a couple of comments I'd like to make, but I think I'll make those when we reconvene back into open meeting, in as much as we have such a paucity of folks here. Our plan tonight is to go into closed session, reconvene from closed session, go into the open meeting. That being the case, let's abbreviate things, and I'll make a motion to go into closed pursuant to 5 Illinois Compiled Statutes 122C2, which is discussion of negotiating matters between district and its employees or their representatives, deliberations concerning salary schedules, as well as 5 Illinois Compiled Statutes 122C11, when pending litigation or action is probable. Is there a second?
Second.
Dan, you'll be the second, and we'll have to take a roll call. So Dan?
Yes.
Scott?
Aye.
Yes?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Okay, let's go into close. All righty. This is the January 26, 2015 regular board meeting, Board of Education. District 64 the board has, for the past hour and a half, been in a closed session discussing matters related to 5 Illinois Compiled Statutes 122C2 and 5 Illinois Compiled Statutes 122C11. Those are respectively negotiating matters between district and its employees concerning salary schedules. And the second item was litigation that might be probable. So we are now in open session. Our next meeting will be on February 9th. It'll be held here at Jefferson. The board will start off at that meeting at a 6 p.m. session in closed, followed at 6:30 by a COW on financial projections. This will be a very important presentation by Becky Allard, considering that the latest December CPI that came out that will be adjudicated for upcoming levies was 0.8, less than 1%, which is going to have an impact on our projections, I'm sure. Following later after that COW at 7:15, we have a special board meeting. The next meeting after that will be February 23rd. Some of the items to be discussed would be a tentative calendar for the following year, architect contracts, and a review of educational ends and an update. One of the items that I do want to say is, in reviewing this electronic board packet, I had asked that there be something that the board can reference something and jump ahead and jump back. And is MJ here?
Yep.
Hi.
Hi.
Any progress on that? Negotiating through these 200 pages can be somewhat laborious, and jumping back and forth from the agenda into the text and back again. Is there a way that we can kind of help and mitigate this the search process or navigation process in the board packet on these computers?
Yes, we're still working on that with Madeline, and going through the production process and doing that. So
Okay.
trying to tweak that.
As long as you're working on it, that's all I know to know. Thank you. Okay. As we do, we're here. I guess we have a presentation by Leslie, so please.
Great, thanks. Welcome, everyone. We'll begin this evening with the Pledge of Allegiance, and it will be led on video by the 4-year-old students in Mrs. Adamett's and Mrs. Lewis' classroom.
One nation
Yeah, hard act to follow those guys. But we'd like to begin tonight with a short video on the many uses of technology here at Jefferson. And before we start that, I'd just like to mention that earlier this year, we lost one of our students who died suddenly, one of our kindergarten students. And Amina was a little girl who loved technology. So we're going to dedicate this very brief video to Amina. And Janet Grohl, our occupational therapist, is going to introduce her.
Technology at Jefferson is quite diverse. In addition to the familiar educational technology, hardware, and software that the tech department has provided us, such as smart boards to each classroom, iPads in each classroom, and two smart tables shared in the building, we also make use of a wide variety of assistive technology. Assistive technology refers to any item or piece of equipment that is used to maintain or improve the functional skills of people with disabilities. Examples of assistive technology used at Jefferson include pencil grips to support a functional grasp to improve early drawing and support later literacy, adaptive cups or silverware to encourage independent feeding skills, and pictured or tangible objects used to represent words to facilitate communication. In the following presentation, you'll see a series of vignettes illustrating technology as it's used here at Jefferson. You'll get to see the technology used in the classroom settings during circle time, small group instruction, as well as reading times. Specific instructional goals range from improving single word vocabulary, recognizing one's name in print, initiating a communication exchange with a peer or staff, following directions, listening for initial sounds, and learning to wait your turn, and that can be the hardest. You'll also see technology used by some of our therapists when they're working with students on core strength, crossing midline, writing and expanding language, speech, and communication skills. Finally, you'll see technology being used to facilitate turn-taking and sharing. We hope you enjoy our demonstration of our technology at Jefferson.
Very good. Whose name is next? Whose name was behind yours?
Kayla.
Okay. So all the Kayla, it's her turn.
What's on Kayla?
Find a square. Where's a square? Which one? Oh, you found a square? Okay, let's cross out. You do. Cross. Out. Leo, you want to turn?
Yes.
What are you going to do? What do you want to slide?
I want to slide the ball.
Okay, is it circle or square? Where does it go? Whoa! Good job, honey. Excellent. Time for the warm-up party. This is going to get you ready for class. We're going to start with pretzel. Sitting up tall. Hands out in front of you. Thumbs up. Thumbs down. Thumbs up. What animal? I move. But should we touch his tummy? Yeah. Hey, what is he doing? Hey, Tyler, go to sleep.
Go to sleep.
Click on the bicycle. Click on the dog. Click on the monkey. Beef. Vet. Find the one that starts with bun. Beef. Cut. Bud. Bud. Bug. Bug.
amazing. So many ways that you guys are using technology. It's really impressive.
Absolutely, and certainly we are very grateful for the support that we've received from the board and the technology department, especially the addition of the smart boards in each of our classrooms. It's made a huge difference, and I think the staff is using technology more than ever, and I know that that will just continue, so thank you. One last thing, and I would like to just talk very briefly about the extended day kindergarten program. Just gonna wait for the slide. Next slide. Okay. Just briefly, I'd like to update you regarding the extended day kindergarten program, especially since the board was very involved in moving the after-school program to the neighborhood schools. This year, we've made some changes that have been very positive. We redesigned the space, given that it would only be used by kindergarten students. We added activities that focus on play skills, teamwork, and getting along with others. In addition to our long-standing activities such as Scientist of the Week, we've expanded the variety of the weekly themes that we offer. Last week, for example, the students learned about France, built Eiffel Towers, sang French songs, and constructed a French market where they bartered in francs. So a very busy group of morning and afternoon students here at Jefferson. And as you know, you are always very welcome to visit us, and we thank you for your support.
Considered my happy place. When I need a break, I head to Jefferson.
Thank you, Leslie. As we progress through the consent, now is the time for public comments. If there are anybody in the audience who would like to come up and make a comment, please come to the podium and announce your name. Any item other than what's on the agenda, if there's any actionable items on the agenda, of course, we will have discussion on those items. Yeah, please come up.
To be clear, if it's an agenda item, hold comments until then.
If it's an agenda item, that's going to be an actionable item. Poll comments till then.
So you'll hold, because you're here for residency, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
It will be. Should be. We're giving you guys options, so then you'll hear it and we'll vote next week, on the 9th? Okay. So then she can come up.
Yeah, we're not going to have an action on that residency item tonight, where it's discussion. So if you'd like to come up and make a comment, you can.
Good evening. My name is Joan Sandrick. I have lived in Park Ridge with my husband for over 40 years. Since you're putting your hands deeper in our pockets with yet another levy, I think it's important that we ensure that we are educating students within the district who are there legitimately. To that end, District 207 requires a yearly form, it's 2 pages, to be completed to ensure residency. In addition, with that form, they are requiring parents to provide a copy of the tax bill showing the homeowner's exemption, along with 2 paid utility bills. Why District 64 would do anything less leaves me mystified. And there's another component to that. There are private schools within Park Ridge, St. Paul of the Cross, St. Andrews, Mary Seat of Wisdom. Their student population is not bound by residency. However, currently there are 42 students receiving services from District 64. The same residency requirements should apply to those students. So I would say every 3 years is not sufficient. I think it needs to be done on a yearly basis. And I think it's important that the board show some respect for the tax dollars they're getting. Thank you.
Are there any other public comments? And not seeing any, we will move to the first item on the agenda for discussion, and that's the CEC calendar. One point is, I know that on the 3rd we have Dathan and Dan scheduled, and you'll be speaking of that. On the 4th we have Vicki and John, and I'm trying to get scheduled myself for somewhere on the 4th or 5th. I've sent an email to Perry. I've not received anything back.
I can follow up with Perry, but he is usually out in the field, so he is somewhat hard to get a hold of.
Okay.
But I will try to confirm a time with Perry. He's not
That's a
available at
Wednesday.
that time.
I can't do
That's
Wednesday.
the problem.
So, Dr. Hines.
So as many of you know in the room, because I see a lot of staff members here, and certainly the board knows, because a Friday can't go by without me updating them in my Friday memo in terms of our upcoming Consortium for Educational Change visit, where they will conduct an overview system assessment, which is really a fancy phrase for we're going to have external auditors coming in, probably around 24 of them, and they're going to really spend 3 days in the district looking in 3 key areas at how we function as a learning community, how we collaborate with one another, and our results. So when they arrive here on February 3rd, the external team will be reviewing questionnaires and extensive information that we have been gathering as an administrative team. We have also cross-checked some of the information with some of our facilitators and coaches, and what they're going to be looking for during that review time is they're going to give us an overview, a score of how they think we're doing. Then they're going to move to the schools on February 4th, and they're going to interact with 30 or more teachers, about that many students, and about another 30 or so parents. And they're going to be looking for continuity of answer and thought. And they're going to engage those different stakeholder groups, ask them a number of questions, and really record how they're responding, and then they're going to compare those results. So really what they're looking for is, what does every person that comes into contact with the district feel as to how we're doing in the areas of learning, collaboration, and result. So that'll take place the school time on the 4th, and hopefully many of you in the audience are going to participate. We really want as many folks involved as possible, because that is how we're going to get the best data coming out of the process. Then on February 5th, that external audit team will really meet as a group of, again, around 24 professionals, and really try to come up with an overview that they'll share with us. They're going to give us a 1-hour presentation on some of their initial takeaways from their time in district. Since they're going to be doing that midday, and our teachers are going to be working with students, we're going to videotape the presentation and have it available for anybody to watch. We will also put portions of that video or all of that video up on our website for folks to view potentially. Then within the next month after they leave, they're going to write a written report, and they're going to give the report to us. I will share it with the Board of Education. We will post it on our website, and we will certainly make it available to all staff. I don't know that it's been decided if you guys will go over it at principals and their staffs at a building meeting. We haven't gotten to that detail yet, but at some point in March, that data will be made available to everyone in the district. And really, what the CEC tries to do is they give you a list of anywhere from 3 to 5 suggestions in each of those areas that they feel if you really push kind of on this lever, you can make the biggest impact to continue to improve what we're doing in terms of learning, collaboration, and results. And really, that's what we'd like. An external lens to give us some data that we can evaluate what we'd like to do with it. We'll bring that data to strategic planning, and it might inform some of those strategic planning categories. Because one of my other reports coming up here in a minute will be about strategic planning. So it's just the right time to get some data from some outside experts that we can think about and discuss what of it we might want to put into place in terms of strategic planning. So as Dr. Borelli said, there's board participation, at least 4 of you. Hopefully we can add Tony. So we'll have 5 of our 7 members that will be able to weigh in. And that is really the report that I have to provide. If there's any questions, I will entertain them.
I have a few questions, one of which is on the 3rd, when they're going to convene at the ESC and all these groups are going to have to go there. Do you foresee any any problems with the movement of the groups to the ESC facility? And what about the downtime or any possible negative effect to the district operations while these building principals and other select groups are going to be essentially out of commission? I don't know the time frame. Is it hours?
It's
1
about
hour?
40 minutes per group.
Okay,
So it's, I
so
mean, we
you
have
don't
so
see
many
any-
meetings all day that we're kind of in and out of. It's gonna feel just like any old day where that's gonna be a 40-minute meeting slot that we're working with the CEC. And I actually really think people are looking forward to the opportunity to kind of lend their voice and to share where they think we're really doing well and where we probably have some opportunities to improve. Because this isn't about good or bad, it's all about improvement. Where are we now and where do we want to be, and we want to map the path to get there. And I think people are willing to give that time because we really are all in this for the same purpose. We want to educate kids to the best of our ability. We want to do so collaboratively.
My last question is, would viewing the questionnaire that was filled out by the district be of any benefit to the board in preparing for this process?
I don't know. It's pretty comprehensive and it's full of educational ease. So I don't know if it would be something that a board of non-educators would find valuable, or if it might just really be confusing and you might need a dictionary to go along with the questionnaire. So they'll take a lot of questions from the kind of the questionnaires that we asked, and they're there to clarify any terms. So I don't necessarily think it would be worthwhile for you guys to do that. But we
Fair.
can certainly make it available.
Oh, fair enough. That's what I wanted to ask. You know, what it was about, how it would help guide us in that process.
The biggest thing we're concerned about right now is, believe it or not, it's a low-level thing, but it will matter on the 3rd is parking. Because we're going to have a lot of people coming here, and then when the CEC goes to the schools, spots are at a premium. So Scott has been working on, whether we can park at the church or the old AT&T building, and we're working through those details, because that's going to be where we're going to have the biggest struggle on those days. So we've got some calls out, and we're shoring up where these folks are going to park.
So Lori, on the 3rd, do you need Dathan and I aware of what time? Is it 11 o'clock?
It's in the Friday memo. I don't have my computer because it's going to be used for my PowerPoint, but I want to say, if you're on the 3rd, you're at the ESC. It's those of you that are at the 4th that will be at Jefferson. And I can double check the time for you, Dan, once I get my
If you
computer
don't
back.
mind sending me an email.
Sure.
confirming where it's not, Thank you.
Any further board questions on the CEC calendar? If not, that leads us right into the strategic planning calendar.
Okay. Again, as you know, we are working with Bob Ewey. He really is a kind of a nationally renowned strategic planner and consultant that has worked in some prestigious districts that have earned the Baldrige Award for Education. And really, he helps districts kind of vision. Where are we now? Where do we want to be? And then what is the plan to get there? Which really is what strategic planning is all about. What do we value? What are our end goals? And then building a multi-year plan with action steps and timelines to get us there. This district is not new to strategic planning. 5 years ago, it partnered with Cambridge to work on a strategic plan. At the end of this school year, that plan will be sunset, and due to all the hard work of the staff, parents, and administrators in the district, they will have really fully realized that last strategic plan. So it's just the right time. I think with the new superintendent coming in, that strategic plan is sunsetting, and we're about to embark on what we're calling Vision 2020, because that's really what we're visioning for. Where do we want to be 5 years from now in 2020? It seems hard to believe, but that's what we're going to do. So Bob is going to join us, and we've had many, many months of conversation with Bob in preparation for his arrival in district on Thursday, February 5th. He'll be overlapping with the CEC. And there has been an open invitation put out to staff, and we will continue to advertise because Bob wants to hear from as many staff members as are able to come and join him from 4:15 to 6 o'clock on that Thursday. Really to introduce himself, to talk about his process, and then just to be a listener. At this point, we're leaning towards the Emerson LRC, but we have to confirm available space. We originally thought we would do it at Franklin, but Bob was not pleased with an auditorium style. He wanted it to be a little more collaborative. So I will make sure you know the location as well as communicate that to the staff once it's been solidified. Then on Friday, February 6th, when our teachers are in Institute, Mr. Iwi will tour the district so he gets a sense of the community of Park Ridge and Niles that we serve. He's going to move through all of our schools, so he has a kind of a context to put what we're talking about. He has a picture in his mind of our schools. And he will meet with the executive committee where we will review an environmental scan. What are the things we're working on? What are we facing in terms of kind of local governments and local issues? So we will share that external environmental scan with him. I'm working on that right now, getting all of that information together for him. He will then, on Saturday, February 7th, hold his kickoff session. And that will be with the Strategic Plan Steering Committee. As you may have seen over the last few weeks, I sent out school messengers eliciting participation from staff and parents. And I've received to date over 65 folks that are interested in serving on the committee. We really originally thought we'd want to target 30 to 35, and we're finding ourselves having to kind of push that number a little. And we're right around 40. So after tonight's meeting, we will tomorrow be notifying the lucky participants that have been selected to join our steering committee, and then we're going to kick off that work on February 7th. I will be sharing kind of an overview of the roadmap so the community knows not only where we've been the last 5 years, but what we've been focusing on this year, and we'll set that vision, that stage for 2020. Bob will make sure the steering committee is very aware of the process in which he helps people's strategic plan, as well as the schedules and timeline. He will present his kind of national external scan, what's happening kind of out in the world of education, and then I will follow up on something more localized, what's happening in Illinois, Senate Bill 16, cost shift Senate Bill 1, some of the things that we're facing, as well as some of the educational mandates, PAR, Common Core, so on and so forth. So what's on that local docket that could impact the classroom and school districts. And then we will really start to dig into the survey. Bob has some survey questions that he likes to use. We'll go over those with the committee to see if we need to add or change the survey. So we'll walk away from that first morning from 8 to noon with a nice foundation for strategic planning. And then he'll be back in district for 3 more steering committee meetings. Those meetings will take place on March 26th, April 16th, and May 21st, all in the evening. And we have a variety of important tasks that we're going to engage in. We'll use data. We'll talk about the data of different surveys. We'll start to prioritize some of the data findings. We will engage in a SWOT analysis where the group, SWOT stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats or challenges that we might face, and how we have to kind of factor and plan for the data that comes out of the SWOT. What I think Bob is exceptionally good at is kind of taking a lot of information and a lot of voices and helping us synthesize what we should be focusing on, not only during those meetings, but in between meetings. So that executive committee, some of the administrative cabinet, will have a lot of work to do for Bob in between the meetings to keep the process moving along. It is our sincere hope that on Monday, June 8th, we will have a draft strategic plan to present to the board. And then on Monday, June 22nd, again, it is our hope that we have your vote to approve the strategic plan. So starting in February and by the end of June, we hope we have a strategic plan that will guide us through the next 5 years. Over the course of the summer, we may have some subgroups that will need to do some work to flush out timelines, tasks, and activities. And then we plan to unveil the approved strategic plan to the staff at Institute Day, unless the committee wants us to do something sooner. This is all tentative until the committee gets to work. It's our best guess at this point. And then really we will start day 1 of the 2015-16 school year with the new plan as our guide. So that is an overview of the process. What I do want to know is if there are up to 2 of you that would like to participate, because we can't have any more than 2, in this process. I'll take your names and add you to the lucky recipient letter that will go out tomorrow. There's the ones I described. So there's 3 in the evening. February 7th is from 8 to noon. That's a Saturday. And then you have March 26th, April 16th, and May 21st. All 4, yes.
I'd like to participate, but I can't make that February 7th.
Okay. That's a tough one. I know 'cause it's during the day, family obligation.
No,
Well,
it's sports.
shoot me an email, think it through, check your schedule, and then let me know.
Okay.
One question I have, because we're kind of wrapping up the last one, and starting the next one.
Mhm.
And I know we've had updates along the way, but and maybe you talked about this and you decided it wasn't a good idea, but before this one, is there any thought of doing sort of a look back or a summary of the last strategic plan? Not only, here were all the objectives, how did we do? I know sometimes we don't have quantitative, but, give us a letter grade A, B, C, or D, however it works. But I was wondering particularly what occurred to me was lessons learned. I know once we got into it, there were a lot of things we thought, wow, we had big eyes at that point, and then when we got into the details, we said it's probably just not worth the effort. I just wonder if that would be helpful in this process, and maybe it can be introduced later down the road when you start to filter ideas and so forth, but it just would occur to me that a look back on that, even though we haven't quite hit the 5 years, we're really close, maybe you give us someone then takes a stab at giving us a grade on each of our objectives and how we did and didn't do, and then lessons learned. I thought it would probably guide this pretty well.
Sure, I think it's a great idea. We have not actually talked about it, so I thank you for raising it. Those of you that have been here longer than 7 months, can you tell me if at any point within the last 5 years, did you report to the board at the end of each year? Because I know there's that color-coded document when things were being finished and kind of moving through the process.
We got really good reporting, and Bernadette, thank you for them. They were very good. I was just thinking that, now that we're saying it's effectively terminated, or will be terminated, some things were done, some weren't. It'd be nice to have a summary at the end just saying, this is how we did, and you know what, hey, we got 80% of it done. That's pretty darn good, actually, when you look at the scope. Something like that.
I think your other concept, though, is lessons learned
Right.
from it.
Yeah,
That's
I
probably
wrote that
more
down.
important. Was it too exhaustive? Was it too pie in the sky? Was it maybe in some areas not specific enough? So I think that retrospective analysis probably, Scott, is the best takeaway. And I appreciate your suggestion.
I would agree, but I also think we owe it to the community to score ourselves on this and say, we spent money 5 years ago on this and through the years, and this is how we think we did, at least, a self-assessment for whatever value that's worth. I, as one board member, would like to say, okay, I at least got a sense that we did get this done, and as a backup, and hopefully it wouldn't be too much work. So it was just a thought I'd throw out there.
I think it's a great thought. So I will add it to our team meeting on Monday, and then I'll look at the board agenda topics to see where we have room. It would probably be best if we could get it in February before we get too far down the line with the new process. So I'll see. I don't think we have time on the 9th, but possibly the 26th.
We'll take it.
Just a thought.
Yeah.
Good one.
The CEC verbal report is going to be given, the verbal report now is no earlier than 2/5, and the written report will be given at least 2 weeks after that. Is there going to be enough time to have that CEC report and analyze that data, and then assimilate that into the strategic plan process? And I was looking at the dates, and is that going to be a very tight timeline?
I mean, it is a tight timeline, and we have talked to Bob, Iwi, and Perry, who actually know each other through kind of the strategic planning, Baldrige continuous improvement kind of circuit, if you will. They know each other, even though they don't live in the same state, and they are of a very similar mind. So they speak each other's language, if you will. And Perry assured us, as did Bob, that although they're coming and there's a level of overlap, that they both believe that the timing is just right. They're actually pleased that they're this close together because they do think one process will inform the next. So they feel as though, and they've done this, all over the country. Well, at least Bob has. Perry's Illinois-based. They don't see any concern. Which, at one point, Bernadette was on the phone with me. I was very nervous one day that it was too close, and they talked me down, and they said it'll work. It'll be fine. So I'm no longer concerned. I think we've got it.
By the way, I think that's a very marketable slogan, 2020 vision.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very Any other board comments on CEC or strategic planning calendar agendas? And if not, I'm really looking forward to this. This is the first of its kind in this district anyway, and I think it's going to be eye-opening. I'd be very interested to see what comes out of this.
I'm looking forward to it as well. All right, MJ?
Next item, superintendent evaluation update, district priorities and goals.
Okay.
Yeah?
All right, MJ, my Vanna, she has my computer, give her just a second. I put together just a brief couple of slides to kind of walk us through this update. So while MJ is getting that set, as the board knows, and maybe a handful of people in the room know, when I started my transition in the district, really February or March of last year, I did a lot of listening and a lot of learning. I had 10 days where well, it was really about 20 days that I was here prior to taking over in July. And one of my primary goals was to meet as many people as possible, engage people in conversation, and really listen to them about the district, get to know the district, kind of where have we been, where are we heading, what do they see as, really strengths, what makes Park Ridge, what are they working towards, what are some of their goals. So I took all that information and, I used that information, as well as I reviewed a lot of documents. I reviewed the existing strategic plan, your board consensus goals, met with the administrators, and I really then began to kind of synthesize all of that information to say, wow, we're almost done with this current strategic plan because they had really made that much progress over the last 5 years. What are we going to spend the year focusing on while we build towards this new strategic planning process? So as you know from our July advance, from a Board of Education perspective, I created a one-year roadmap, and with the analysis of all the information that I gathered during my transition time, really identified kind of 6 big areas that I just really sorted and named based on those key factors. And for those of you, that are looking at the screen, this is what it looks like. It really has been an internal document that I've been using to just guide our work. But if you could flip to the PowerPoint now, MJ. And I've taken these 6 key success factors, these 6 big areas, and I'm just going to provide you with a mid-year goal update. After 7 months in district, kind of this is where we are. All right, now I've got this now. Okay, perfect. So the roadmap, these transition meetings that I spoke of, those listen and learning sessions, they took place, reviewed strategic plan consensus goals, and then we had to factor in new mandates, things like the Common Core standards, next generation science, all things that weren't on the horizon 5 years ago when that strategic plan was built. We had to build those in, and the district began doing that work, a year or 2 ago. But it really continues to be, something that we're working towards. So that is kind of, those are some of the key documents and ways in which I gathered information for the roadmap. So in listening and looking at the strands from the existing strategic plan, there were kind of 6 big areas that it seems that we needed to continue to focus on. Certainly we're a school district, so outstanding student achievement and growth, we want our kids to learn and be smarter when they leave us than when they enter in our classroom. That's kind of first and foremost. 21st century learning, 15 years into the 21st century, are our classrooms, our buildings from an infrastructure standpoint, set to take the technology and to move us further down that 21st century learning environment road. We have to look at that one-to-one initiative. Highly qualified staff. This is a wonderful community. They deserve to have highly qualified teachers in their classrooms delivering a high level of instruction. So we wanted to do a couple things to keep driving at that point. Safe and effective learning environment. Certainly, other than learning, student safety is very important to us. We want to make sure that the classrooms are equipped to do what we need them to do. A stable financial position. If we don't have that, we can't do any of the other stuff. So we have to watch our finances, especially with things changing at the state level and the state of Illinois being in the trouble that it is financially. And then effective partnerships and processes. We don't operate in a vacuum. We have a lot of other entities in the community, and we want to make sure that we're building those partnerships. So those were kind of some of the 6 areas that seemed to kind of bubble to the top as I was talking to different groups and looking at different documents. So the first one for tonight, my focus is really going to be how have we done and where are we 7 years in? 7 years, oh my goodness, 7 months. Maybe it feels like 7 years sometimes, but it's just 7 months. Where are we? And these are, I'm going to go over the high impact areas, or where I have found myself spending the largest amount of my time, or where we're assigning the largest number of resources. So in terms of outstanding student growth and achievement, some of the areas of focus, and this was something that the board, from your consensus goals, you were very interested in. Really looking at the Illinois Interactive Report Card and being able to compare us to other like districts that were high performing, had similar demographics, similar socioeconomic profiles, and similar or even slightly better achievement. You know, who do we want to benchmark ourselves against to know if we are in fact, doing what we think we should be in such a nice community. Dr. Lopez has really been working with her Northbrook partners to form some type of a PLC where districts that have very similar profiles from ours are willing to share their data. Because if you remember, MAP doesn't really share out the data. They only share it out to their district, but we don't have access to anybody else's data that has a similar profile. So we're in the process of trying to get those districts, as most are doing their second round of MAP assessments this winter, to start sharing those, the data so we can compare ourselves apples to apples across with the MAP results. You know, professional development is a huge focus in this district. I think it's really one of the things we do probably best. We really provide our teachers with a lot of opportunities to continue to learn. So as you heard me report in the fall, Dr. Jim Knight works with our teachers. He's a nationally recognized speaker, and he does a great full-day presentation on high-impact instruction. Because we know that not every instructional strategy is created equal. He really is targeting instruction and planning and preparation for teachers to ensure that their lessons are really coming in using some of those high-impact instructions. And to date, because one of the things you wanted me also to track was how many teachers are participating. It's great that we offer them, you told me, but are they really taking advantage? And to date, we had 25% of the staff go through, and I believe, Dr. Lopez, correct me if I'm wrong, we had another session scheduled that we had to cancel due to weather or something with Dr. Knight. So our percentages may have been a little higher, but we have to work to reschedule him. The problem is when we miss a day with Jim Knight is getting him back, because he really is booked years at a time. Years at a time. So, you know, we're going to continue to offer high-impact instruction. It's not going to be a flavor of the month, and next year it's going to be something else. We feel very strongly that this is the right professional development, the right thing to focus on. So Jim Knight and high-impact instruction's here for a while. And, you know, it would be our delight if everybody went through. That is certainly our goal, and we're just going to keep, chipping away at that year after year. 7 strategies of assessment for learning. That has to do with the formative assessment, how teachers use data to make those in-time instructional changes to maximize groups and what they're doing with kids when they're showing signs of struggle or the opportunity for enrichment. And we've had 65% of our teachers go through that. So I think that's quite impressive. And that, again, just like high-impact instruction, is not going to go anywhere. We plan to continue to work on 7 strategies and have that be our area of focus for years to come. And then MAP, as you know from Dr. Lopez's report in the fall, and from your desire to make sure that all of our students are growing, not just to report status scores of how our students are doing in aggregate, but really to look at and get more growth focused. Where are the kids coming in and how are they responding to our core instruction, and those kids that are getting CFC or primary challenge or other interventions, how are they growing over time? So the teachers and the principals have really worked very hard this year on data days, and they've been learning how to use that growth data, setting some growth targets with students, and really doing some tracking. So that has begun to take hold. They're going to repeat that process here in the fall because we've just administered that winter window in grades 3 through 8. And that is a work in process. That does not happen overnight, but I think we've made a very good initial pass, and we're coming around for pass number 2 here in the winter. In the spring, Dr. Lopez will report our end of the year, both status and growth data, and with the board, and we'll see at that point what impact that additional professional development, that additional focus that the teachers have put on it in the classroom, what that's doing to our growth targets. And then just, as we transition, as you know, ISAT is no longer. Park is on the horizon. We will be administering Park in March and again in May. And, I think it's really important for us to remember that this is a benchmark year. This is a new assessment that none of us have really seen. We've done some field testing. We've done some sample problems, but it hasn't been road tested for the whole year. So, there are some concerns. It's certainly we're gonna lose some instructional time, a significant amount actually, that we're gonna track exactly how long it is gonna take to administer these assessments, both in March and May. We have to keep track of how our students are responding. Students in grades 3 through 8, it's potentially gonna be very stressful for them. It's a very different test than ISAT. It's a lot more rigorous than the ISAT assessment was, because it's not on those Illinois learning standards. It's again on a more rigorous set of standards with some of the progressions in content finding their way down into earlier grade levels. And then the validity of the results, because it is year one. We really want to take time to analyze those results and just see how they're going to be reported, and then what lessons, the states that are participating in Park will have learned during the first year of implementation. So that is something to certainly keep in mind. We want to participate. Illinois is a governing state, but we're gonna be cautious, and we're gonna watch the results and how they're reported, because it is really just one measure. It's that day-to-day work that the teachers are doing when they're focused more on those 7 strategies of assessment for learning that we feel is a bigger lever and a bigger indicator, a bigger impact on instruction and potentially learning. But we know we have to administer these standardized tests because our state board tells us to. So we'll keep you posted on Park. So 21st Century Learning, you'd have to be under a rock not to know that we launched a one-to-one initiative where we had 2,000 iPads and 3,300 Chromebooks kind of simultaneously show up in the hands of our students. And it was no small feat. It really took every ITC, LIS, tech coach, classroom teacher, administrator, and it just to work together to really make this happen. So I can't thank everybody in district enough for getting this one-to-one initiative off the ground. We have immersed ourselves, as you've heard us report, on the Google Apps for Education. We have a lot of kids working collaboratively using Google Docs, and it's just been exciting to see. MJ talks about that Google, the ecosystem, and we just continue to build it. 6 months into the school year, it is really amazing to see, and you see it in my monthly newsletters, and I report it out in my bulletins to you. Every time I'm in the classrooms, it is amazing to me. Doesn't matter what grade level you saw here with our youngest learners at Jefferson, technology is being used in every classroom, in every content area, and the teachers are putting in a lot of extra time to change their instructional practice to include all of these Chromebooks. It's very different than it was last year. So as you've heard us say before, it's going to be multiple years before this is fully implemented. But we're knee deep into it now, and we're just going to continue to apply more and more technology where we find it to be the right place to put it. We always say not technology for the sake of technology, but technology where we think it's the right tool to use. I've had a few parents ask, are we going to move away from real books and paper and pencil? And my answer would be absolutely not. Teachers get to make those decisions on a daily basis. Is it best to use technology, or should I stick with another, educational tool? And they're making, very good, I think, decisions in that regard. So Hapara is used in grades 3 through 8, and it really is, again, helping our teachers be able to assign kids tasks on the computer. They can monitor progress and appropriate use of the technology through the Hapara dashboard. So it is just something that I think we're going to continue to monitor and can grow in its usage over time. All right. So Bright Bites. Last year we used the Lodi survey, and this year we brought in Bright Bites. It gave us an opportunity with a new technology initiative to have a new survey mechanism to get baseline data. How are we doing in classroom access, technology skills, and that technology environment? That data was reported out to the board by MJ Warden, and teachers will participate in a spring survey, and then we'll have a comparative. We scored very high in access, as one can imagine, because it's no longer an issue of access because we've given computers to everybody, but we wanted to see our numbers in the skill and in certain classroom areas continue to grow. So we will report to you in the spring data, and then kind of that growth differential. And then we'll use that data also to figure out what professional development opportunities we need to provide for staff in the summer and or, throughout next year. So that's Bright Bites. SAManage is a new instrument as well. It was put in place to help us really troubleshoot technology. So when teachers are experiencing difficulty with some of their technology, they go into SAManage and they enter a ticket, and then the tech department monitors the ticket, and it's supposed to help get teachers the resources, whether it be a human resource or additional devices. And it's something that we're working through. It hasn't been completely smooth, but I would say it's essential for us to understand where are we experiencing trouble. Is it with the devices? Is it a user issue? Is it who knows what? But we're really trying to kind of troubleshoot the need for a quick response versus a way to house all the things that are happening in the world of technology that need to be troubleshot, if you will. So we're kind of balancing SAManage, and we'll evaluate how effectively it's worked at the end of this year. So that was SAManage also rolled out. And then the Parent University series. Hopefully you've heard us talk about them, and maybe you've been able to pop into them. We have tried to pair them with board meetings, so you can go to one while you're out, hit a Parent University, and then come on down here when we don't have closed. Chromebook 101 was the first one, and it was very well received and I think well attended. And then you can see some of the other offerings. Internet Safety in 21st Century, Google Apps for Education, which is tonight. And we will just continue to offer more and more Parent University sessions regarding technology, and as well as some other sessions. But it's been a very busy, as you can imagine, year with 21st Century, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. So kudos to the tech department. Highly qualified staff. One of the favorite things that I get to do is these walk and talks with principals, and it really allows me to see the district in action. I love walking in and out of classrooms, connecting with staff and students. The kindergartners call me the principal of the principal, which I joked with a few people, it's going to be my new business card. But I get to see what's happening, and that really helps me see our wonderful teachers in action. As you heard me report last month, we are going to be launching a national board certification cohort. Lori, was it 40 or so teachers?
No, actually, 33 were up to now.
33 teachers came out to find out about national board certification and if we were to bring a cohort in district. So I think it's an exceptional response. And I think it also speaks volumes of how committed the teachers are to furthering their craft and continuing to do good work but try to get better, and that's what National Board Certification believes in. We have, as you've read in my updates, we have 2 teacher evaluation groups kind of in process. We're looking at the current teacher evaluation instrument against some instruments written by outside professionals to see where we're going to land. Are we going to revise what we have? Are we going to modify? Are we going to have a hybrid, or are we going to adopt a Danielson or a Marzano model and rework our teacher evaluation instrument to align with the new legislation, the PARA initiative? And then we have the student growth component. So we have a pre-joint committee subgroup working on what that is going to look like. So we have 2 very important groups working right now. It would be our extreme hope to be able to pilot and kind of have a decision and something to pilot for 2015-16, because for 2016-17, both have to be in place and up and running. So we're just going to keep working and working and working, and I will continue to give you updates as to the progress that we're making. And lastly, a few weeks ago, we had Ventures, now bought out by a company called HumanX Training. The administrative team was trained, and really what HumanX does is it's a comprehensive screening tool that can be used with applicants with employment decisions. So we screen folks, and then there's a criteria that they provide that scores candidates, and then based on how they score, they either advance or they don't advance through the interview process in our district. So we've had 2 sessions. We have a few more sessions, And then it is our goal to have that process up and running for 2015-16 hires. Because we really do, want to make sure that the new staff that we're hiring is really up to the task and up to snuff in terms of working in a district like Park Ridge-Niles 64. So that's in process, and I will give you an update once that is complete. Safe, effective learning environment. So building security enhancements you've heard me talk about this year. Raptor, the Raptor system, these lanyards, we have new fobs, and we have those additional exterior cameras. So we've done a lot of work to enhance security. Last week, we had the start of door lock demos. We had a system came up from the Carolinas, and the principals were able to take a look at a variety of different doors and door lock mechanisms that would give teachers faster, the ability to more quickly close their doors during a lockdown or a crisis situation. So that is kind of an in-process addition to the possible security enhancements that we can bring to district. We have concluded, or we're very, very, very near the conclusion of the work at Carpenter. We have the commissioners, we did the commissioning study, and we brought on the construction management company, as you know, Nicholas and Associates, to bring this this issue to a successful close. Phase 2 of field has been bid and will be underway. And then, as you know, we have hired FGM to conduct our master facility study that will begin this month, or the month of February. And they will also be in charge of getting our 10-year life safety work underway, which is, required through Illinois School Code. The data will be used from the master facility and 10-year life safety to develop options for additional security, additional security options for us. I see options there twice. As well as, it will map out from a strategic planning perspective. What are our current buildings doing for us? Where do we need to focus our energies and potentially our very important financial resources to make sure that the buildings are doing what we need them to do for the foreseeable future. So that work is also starting in February. Stable financial position. Some of the things you had really wanted us to focus on, we're streamlining those monthly reports and providing that executive summary, which Becky and her office have done. We put together the first time ever financial report to 2014 to the community. It was an e-publication. It was sent through School Messenger, the link to all families. We also invested in postcards that were mailed to every home in Park Ridge. So folks that don't have children within our system can see our investment in student learning, how we're using our valuable resources to not only provide a great education for students, but to enhance property values within the community because we have such wonderful schools. To budget and adopt the levy, and then to do some long-range forecasting, which you will have an update with PMA at our next board meeting. That's the COW, the special board meeting. So we continue to work to really manage our maximize our revenues and manage our expenditures. Effective partnerships and processes. So you've heard me talk about the first two bullets, CEC and strategic planning, both of which we are actively seeking input from teachers, from community members, and from students when appropriate, because they are valuable partners in the work we do as a school system. We have just a much enhanced website, and we continue to fine tune and add new layers to the website. And the feedback that we have received this year is that it's not only is it slick, but it's just much easier to navigate. Hopefully you take the time to read the Parents as Partners Educational Notes newsletters. It's chock full of information, what's happening in the schools. It's got cute pictures of kids learning, and really it is a way to make sure that we are pushing information out to the community in terms of the many great things that we're doing as a district. Because you can't rely on just the kids coming home, what did you learn today? Nothing. We want to make sure that they know that we do a lot of teaching and they're doing a lot of learning. And then community memberships and partnerships. As you know, I'm a Rotarian. I'm a member of the Kiwanis, and I've been, and a member of Chambers. So I've been actively looking for ways to get more involved in the community of Park Ridge and to kind of build those relationships. So hopefully many of my new friends in those areas will participate in strategic planning and continue to further partner with us to write our 2020 plan. So next steps. The roadmap has been a great tool for the last 7 months. We got 5 months to go. We still have some work to do. At my next at the next board meeting on the 9th. During closed session, I will go into my evaluation specifically and show you the one-to-one linkages towards the goals that you've set forth for me in terms of my evaluation. I will give you an update as to what projects have wrapped and what projects are still underway. And then we continue to work at a brisk pace, but I have a great team that supports me, and we're just getting a lot done together. So that concludes my report on what I've been up to since joining the district 7 months ago. What questions do you have for me?
I just think it's fantastic, and I appreciate all your hard work and the work of your staff members, and I'm just so excited to have you on board.
Well, thanks. I'm excited to be here.
So Laura, I think you've made great strides since you came on.
Mhm.
The two areas that kind of jump out at me is curriculum. I like that we're talking about that more. I hope that we'll continue to talk about that
Mhm.
more.
You hired a
See more-
CNI superintendent, so
Right.
you're stuck with it.
Yeah, well, I like that. And then the other piece is I think you've done a really nice job with communication. I really like the
Thank
monthly
you.
report, and I like the financial report that you sent out to
Good.
people so that you're kind of reaching out to the community. So one area that possibly, if we can accelerate it all, I'd like to see is security. It's one area that we've got to get there. So,
Yep.
why we don't get there sooner rather than later, it's just one board member speaking, but I'm willing to make the investment today if we can make that happen, because I don't think we're exactly where we need to be, although we've made big strides, and I know you got your eye on it.
Mhm.
If there's anything I can do
Sure.
to help you accelerate that, let me know.
I think the big thing will be what the master facility study tells us. That's going to really help us know what they're recommending, and then they attach dollars to that and timelines, and then it's just a matter of, how quickly you want to move and on how you prioritize those dollars and those projects. So, okay.
And if I can add anything, I'd like to say that you have provided the district, you've pointed the way, and I believe that there is a direction that we're heading. And I'm glad to see that, and I appreciate your efforts.
It's a group effort, but I agree. I think we're on a good road, and these next couple of months with strategic planning and CEC, we'll have an even tighter vision, I think, moving forward, once we all get to participate in that process together. All right, thank you.
And if there's no other questions, now we will have much more discussion about this in the next two closed sessions at the next two respective meetings, so I'm sure that there will be more coming out of this. The next item on our agenda is the report on new residency re-verification registration. Dr. Hines.
Sure. I don't know if anyone wants to join me, but tired of me droning on. But I'll just recap for the audience and for the board. As you know, on December 15th, we shared a recommendation to increase the interval at which we re-verify residency. Because as everybody in the room knows, it's done annually in a lot of districts at the kindergarten level. I was concerned, though, especially after a scenario was brought to our attention by an anonymous community member, that perhaps there was somebody living in a neighborhood, the house was under construction, they weren't there. Should the kids be allowed to stay within our district or not? So we worked through that, but it did beg the question, is checking residency just in kindergarten, is it diligent enough? Or should we be doing, and we used, as the community member talked about, we're well aware of what 207 does, and we started to ask the question, do we want to do something similar to what 207 is doing? Now, granted, they have a 4-year span, we have a 9-year span, but did we want to go to an annual residency check? Did we want to do, keep kindergarten as it is and do as you move from primary to intermediate and then from intermediate to middle? So we proposed something to the Board of Education in terms of adding 2 additional points. To check as kids are entering 3rd, to check as students are entering 6th, and we would require parents, it was our recommendation to require parents to have to just prove that residency again. There are certain documents you need to bring from different categories, and that was our recommendation. But at our meeting in December, a number of board members said, why stop there? Why do just K-6? Why not do yearly residency checks the way 207 does? So our marching orders after that meeting was, okay, now go back, you can do these 3-year checks, kindergarten, 3rd, and 6th, or you can do all 9. What would that look like? What would we have to do? What would it entail from a timing, from a staff, from a dollar, monetary allocation? So I have presented for you, in your board book, 3 options that our small internal subcommittee came up with based on the direction that you provided us in December. So if we take a look at option A, entering, knowing that we're going to continue to do kindergarten, we would be adding when you transition to grade 3 and when you transition to grade 6. So it would be an elementary school-based review. People would be able to go to their schools where their children are currently enrolled and where they're comfortable. And we would offer a combined opportunity. Parents that are home and are able to come during the day, or can, if they work in the community and kind of come during their lunch hour, they could come during the day, or we would set aside an evening, because we know some parents can't come during the day because they're out of work or they have little ones at home and they just can't get it. So we knew we would want to have a day and an evening offering. We would try to contain the amount of time to a 2-week window. If your kids are planning to come back to school, you need to come during these 2 weeks, again, during the day or at night, and the secretaries will check the required documents and to verify residency at the time of drop-off, face-to-face. I've got my paperwork, I'm going to hand it to my building secretary, and she's going to let me know that everything checks out, and then I can then go ahead and work on entering my kids into InfoSnap and getting them registered. So that is option number 1. The business office staff would be available because we do have documentation that isn't always clean or exactly what we need. So the business office then usually has to get involved to help people through alternate ways in which they can prove residency. They would be available for those more extensive checks. And Brian Emhoff and Becky Ellard estimated the cost of option A to the district to be around $5,600. It's not exact, it's a pretty tight number, but that's, the ballpark, so you have a sense of what that would, option A would cost the district. And then we've broken it down in terms of how we came to that number for your information. So option B is the all grades, because several of the board members said, why stop there? Do everybody on an annual basis. So that's an in-person verification of residency, and we would do evening registrations, because that's going to be a large number of people. We estimated it to be over 3,000 families that would have to come, into the district to verify residency within a 2-week window. Unlike 207, where they have a drop-off, that's option C. This option says we really think people should come. It should be a face-to-face meeting where somebody that knows the requirements and knows what official documents look like, really checking at that moment in time. Because when I talked to Dr. Wallace in 207, he did say some folks, he felt turned the other way when he knew that there might be somebody looking at those documents. So this is that having a real person check. Families would bring in the documents, but they would go to 2 middle schools on a Monday through Thursday at the evening time, just to contain where the families are going. And then we would split based on where you, from an elementary perspective, where you feed into what middle school and to where you would go. Missing or incomplete documents would be checked and identified, flagged, if you will, immediately. The business office is there to provide that support, and then InfoSnap codes could be potentially released that evening once you've approved everything, once everything is in order, and then we can begin the registration process. And why that is so important is we need to know who's coming, and we need them to be in the system as fast as possible, because that's how we build class lists, that's how we know who we have to RIF based on enrollment. The sooner we have those numbers, the better it is, that we're not talking about bubble classes and should we or should we not open sections. We want those decisions to be made, and we want to know who's coming as soon as humanly possible. So staff knows if they have a position, and principals can build master schedules accordingly. So that may seem minor, but it actually is really important to the schools and the administrators. That option, as you can imagine, is much more expensive because we're verifying over 3,000 families. It would be oldest and onlys. And it would be around $11,000, and we've given you a breakdown as to how many clerical staff members, business office, and administrators we think it would take to pull this off. Now, certainly the business office, some of the members of the business office and administrators, there's not an additional amount for us, we're just present, but there are certain members of the business office staff we would have to consider paying to work overtime. So that's an $11,000 option. The other option, also an all grades check, option C, we would be checking all grade levels, but it would be a paperwork drop-off, so very much in line with what District 207 is doing. Information would be sent to oldest and only. Parents would deliver the documents in person, so we really wouldn't want them putting all those documents kind of in the mail. It's a lot of, private, personal information. But they would drop it off, and we would specify, again, a 2-week window. And then what we would have to figure out at the building level is how to have the clerical assistants and/or secretaries manage their work and the work of checking residency. Would it be, hiring substitutes to kind of spell them so they can focus on residency? And we would work through all that. But we estimated that model would be a $7,500 option for the district. So those are the 3 scenarios that we looked at based on information that you, and a direction that you had given us as a board at our last meeting. So we certainly think that, re-verification it is important. We don't like just doing it at the kindergarten level, because we do feel as though that we have students that are here that, potentially don't live here, and they're using those valuable financial resources to gain an education that they're not contributing to also. So it is now, up to you guys to decide what you'd like us to do, and then we will plan accordingly. So, what questions do you have for us? And then you guys will have some time between now and the next meeting to further think through these scenarios. If there's any other information you need from us, now will be your time to, ask me and get my team working on answering some of the questions.
Just a quick follow-up. Of the 3 options, just so I understand, and I know we kind of alluded to one earlier, but is there one in particular the administration is saying, I'd recommend to the board you go with this one?
Well, I think it's a fair question, and I think one that, we've gone round and round with. Initially, and back in December, we thought, well, let's keep it small in year 1 as we try to expand and see how it goes, how much work does it really entail, how many folks do we quote unquote catch? Would there be a way to know how many kids that we are catching or not catching? So we had a lot of questions. Is that the right amount starting because we want to do an in-person verification? That would be our preference. Is it right to start small and then see how that goes, and then in the next year decide if we want to expand it or if we just want to keep it at that point? But then the more we started talking about it, we said, or we could just go big and just do everybody and then pull back if we needed to in the future or not. So not being very decisive, we've kind of been everywhere. But I think at this point, we could really go either way. I think it would be our preference that we do an in-person verification, because I do think that would be very helpful. Not only as a service to folks, because registration, can be somewhat tricky. They bring the wrong documents, and then it slows the process down of getting these kids into the system. But I think at this point, the administrative team or our subcommittee thought either would be viable, but probably option B, is one that would certainly ensure we're catching anybody that doesn't belong in the district.
Okay, I just want to make sure I
Yep.
understood what the presentation was before
Yep.
we asked questions. Thanks.
Well, regarding option C, there's no, it seems that it's during the day only, there's no evening hours?
Because it's paperwork drop off. Yeah, we could add.
Just one
For
night,
people that work,
one night
yeah.
per week for people who work, yeah.
Laura, I've got,
That'll drive up the cost, but we can do that.
Laura, I've got a few questions
Sure.
for you. First of all, this was quite helpful, and I appreciated the information in here. One of the things that I think I saw in here was something that I hadn't realized, and I just want to
Sure.
confirm whether I'm understanding it right. I will make sure I understand what we're currently doing. So when somebody registers for the first time, whether it's kindergarten or whether it's moving in from somewhere else, you do request documents to prove residency,
Yes.
correct? And if, let's say I register my children in kindergarten, and you've requested residency documents from me, and 3 years later, as my kid is going into 3rd grade, I tell you that I've moved, and I give you a new address, do you recheck my residency documents at that point and say, okay, different address, now I need proof of residency?
We do. I'm looking at Becky.
Okay.
My phone a friend look.
So,
Okay.
so if I tell you my address
Do you
has
want to come on back?
changed, you
Sorry.
recheck my residency?
Hold on, let's look Becky, because her office deals with a lot of these, and I don't want to give you misinformation.
We do, that would be done at the building level. unless it's a lease that's being renewed at that point in
Well,
time?
I'll get to that
Okay.
one. But so that I understand it, I get checked when I first register. I get checked if I give you a new address.
We ask for utility bills or something to validate the move.
Okay. And then, let's suppose I register my kids in kindergarten, and instead of owning my own home, I rent. And so I hand you a one-year lease as my proof of residency. Do you then next year, when my kid goes into first grade, say, hey, your lease is up, show me another one?
Correct.
And you do this each time? my
Yes, we
lease
do.
expires? Okay. I guess my follow-on question is, can you give me an example of the scenario of who is falling through the cracks at this point? I mean, I imagine this would have to be somebody who proved that they were resident when they moved in to your satisfaction, and moved but never gave you a new address.
Mhm.
Is that what we're talking about?
Yes,
Correct.
exactly.
And then what's happening to the mail that you're sending to those families?
A lot of times it comes back to the district or to the building.
And do you inquire? if
Yes,
you
we
get
do.
bounced back?
That triggers an investigation.
Usually back to the building level, but yes, we do try to investigate those. And sometimes the mail that's returned, people live in apartments, and the mailman doesn't know where to leave the mail, so it just gets delivered back to us, and then we
Okay.
hand deliver it back through the kid to the parent, the
But
student to the
But
parent.
if it does get sent back to you and this happens more than once or something, you look into it, correct?
Correct, we direct those back to the building to do.
Okay, so if I'm understanding the scenario that we are trying to capture, we're now talking about a kid who moved in, was able to prove residency to begin with, did not tell you an address change, and presumably has never had mail bounce back, correct?
Correct.
Right.
And do we think there are a lot of people who don't live in the district, but were once able to prove residency, never told you an address change, and have never had any mail bounce back?
There has, in my 5.5 years here, there have been several situations where we, just because of word of mouth, students have been identified as possibly living outside our district and not giving us those changes of addresses, and we have pursued those, and probably a handful of those students have no longer returned to the district in the 5.5 years I've been here.
And of course, those are people that you have caught under
Right.
the existing system. Yeah, okay, all right. And so, what we're trying to do is we're trying to find people who we don't catch through the additional residency screen, who don't give us a change of address, who never have mail bounce back, and who, for whatever reason, word of mouth has never managed to catch. And the question, of course, is how many of those there are, and is it worth the money that we are considering spending to do it? Because, I don't think anybody wants to educate kids who are not resident in the district. It's just always a cost-benefit analysis of how much effort do you go into to try to read that out. I mean, at the one extreme, you could check everybody's residency every day, and I think we'd all agree that's overkill. On the other end, we could never check residency, and I think we would all agree that that is not diligent enough. And the question is, where to figure in there. So that's helpful.
I would add, though, that for some of those anonymous reportings that we get, we do use a private investigative firm to go out and do some research. Many, many years ago, in other districts, I would go knocking on doors and want to examine where these people lived, if they were doubling up and living with somebody. It's not recommended that we do that anymore, so that most districts have secured the services of a private investigative firm, and we go down that avenue. We probably spend $10,000 to $15,000 a year if we have to go to that level of research.
And would you imagine continuing those services if we did that, or would you think that that would drop out of our budget?
No, I think we probably would continue that.
Okay.
Would not, did you say that?
I would think we would continue under those anonymous reportings, that we would continue.
Okay. Then one more specific question on option C. Option C involves dropping off paperwork and then somebody checks it afterwards. My understanding with District 207, and maybe I'm hallucinating, I don't think you are required to physically hand the paperwork in South's office, just to say, I believe I have mailed my paperwork in on occasion or FedExed it when I'm late or something like that. And, you know, that may be worth nailing down to see, because as I'm reading it right now, I'm reading option C to be more burdensome than what District 207 is doing instead of being equivalent. And, you know, I have not given much thought into dropping off versus, except that it's more, obviously takes more community time if you were asking people to drop off. And I guess my one final comment on these options is, you know, the one thing that's really missing from the dollar figures here is any dollar impact on the community. So you've tallied up the impact that hits our budget. What you have not tallied up is the cost of time for 3,000 people taking, you know, let's say if everybody has to haul themselves into a middle school or an elementary school, you know, everybody's taking an hour or two, 3,000 people times an hour or two times the minimum wage gets you up to, you know, a few tens of thousands of dollars, which are not in the report. So, you know, if there were one thing that I might add to this, I would probably add some calculation of that.
Well, I'm one board member only, but, you know, to have your child educated, you're talking about one parent for maybe multiple children, so I don't think it's quite as high as 3,000. I don't think it's an effort for a family, you know, to copy a couple documents and either drop them off or mail them or come in person. I just want to clarify something. If you do find someone and you hire this investigator, it's my understanding that once they're in the school and they've started the education process, we don't have a right to pull the child out of the classroom, correct?
If they were legitimately a resident on the first day of school, then they can finish for the rest of the year. And then they would not return the following year. But if we find mid-year that when they started the school year and weren't legal residents of District 64, we have every right to remove them from our educational
If
setting.
they're here under false pretenses, they give us false verification, we can remove them.
Can
Mhm.
we? Okay, I did not.
Yes, we can.
It's
And again, we've done that once or twice during my tenure here.
So it seems like obviously the optimal time to do this is prior to the start of the school year, either late spring, early summer. And I think to follow up on John's point about time, you know, I think as you look at option B and option C, you know, I think the option B to me could seem like a really horrible situation. You're asking all these families to show up and wait to have things verified. You know, I can envision long lines of people, you know, things of that nature. So I think looking at B versus C, I would think C would be more optimal because you even if it's a drop off or if there's a mail option, I think the time involved, you know, for parents is much less for that. You know, I think, you know, as you know, Lori, I've been a big advocate for doing the residency check, and I think initially I started out thinking not to do this for all grades, but I know, you know, after listening to Dan and others in our prior meetings, you know, I think, you know, option C to me would seem to be, you know, really, you know, my thought as to where we should go. And I think the comment about the, you know, delaying the registration process with the InfoSnap, I think if you do this in the springtime or something like that, you can get that done before the end of the school year. Then I don't know really how that would delay the InfoSnap registration, because you would hopefully know, you know, before school's out, you know, if we've got documentation or not.
Oh, yeah, I mean, we build the start of class lists and hiring and letting people know if they're coming back. We definitely try to do that. It's our preference to do it before school ends and in the spring. So I think we were targeting after spring break to do any of these options, you know, starting in early April.
And I look at the cost here. I mean, if you think about the fact that if we had a situation where we are creating a second section of a class in a particular grade at a school because we've got one extra student maybe that's made us reach that point, if we have one less student and we don't to hire an additional teacher for that, that cost far outweighs, the numbers that are being displayed here. So I think it's worth doing, and maybe we need a year or two to evaluate it, to figure it out. I mean, obviously, we all know some people might just move and leave, for all sorts of other reasons, and we're not gonna have a way unless they tell us that's why they're not coming back, to determine whether or not it was this residency check or just their personal, lives that led them somewhere else. But, I believe there'd be real value in option C.
I too liked option C. At first, I was going to go with option kindergarten 246 kind of thing. And I'm looking at these the costs, and it would probably cost close to what it would cost for all the grades. So I'm now in favor of option C. But I'm intrigued to see what possibilities there are of mailing in, during a 2-week time frame, and if there is necessity to visit or be in person, to have one night during each of those 2 weeks for people to show up and adjudicate anything that needs to be done. I don't think that's, it probably will offset by having stuff mailed in. Or instead of a day, just have a nighttime, that kind of a thing. Change the schedule up a little bit. But my main question is to Rebecca. I know that the the school code states that once you start school, and I know all about that, if there's fraudulent, information, it can go away. But the security, hiring the private investigators and such, if we do a thorough evaluation such as this, and this evaluation will occur somewhere around April-ish, March, April-ish, and stuff happens, I get that. I would see, though, that those dollars would go down and would partially offset some of this. It's hard to prognosticate, of course, but I would certainly imagine by doing this amount of pre-work, you're going to have perhaps the cost, and if we had been spending, let's say, on average 12 a year, I would hope, and I don't know the specifics with those, but you do. So I would hope that perhaps 50% of that cost would go away to offset some of this other cost.
And it may, but if we're doing the verification in April, a lot of moves happen, especially the renters and those who may be doubling up and living with somebody else. Those circumstances can change over the summer, and if we're not notified of those changes when they occur, then somebody may notice after school starts that, and then that's when we would use the private investigator.
Well, you mentioned renters, and John mentioned this before, but if you have to bring in a lease in April showing that you're going to lease through the next year, and your name is not on the lease, I would seemingly think that would be a red flag.
Well, and we require other documents in addition to the lease, because number one, leases can be downloaded from the internet and filled in the blanks, and multiple people can sign them, and you don't know the validity of them. And so we still require some type of mail that they receive at those addresses, whether it be utilities. A lot of times utilities included in the lease, so some type of bill, a bank statement, something that would validate that they actually live at that address. So we still require documents for a lease.
Any other questions?
Well, I think I should give my comment. I think everyone heard my opinion at other meetings. I think that all grades is the way to go. I think it's a small cost. I mean, for even a person who's got 2 children in the school, I think it's a very small cost considering what the community's paying in tuition. $15,000 a child, to ask them to come in and to provide that paperwork. Lori, what I would say is I'd go for the most thorough way we can check residency. I think that we're asking a lot of the community to commit to pay for these students, and it's the least we can do back, and I want to see it done every year. So if that's option B is the most thorough way, I would say option B. If you feel that C is as thorough and not as much a burden on people, then I'd be okay with that too. But I think it's something that needs to be done for all grades and should be done.
Thank you. So for option C, just so I have my notes, I need to check if we're gonna decide if we want to allow a mail-in option instead of the drop-off. And then if we add a night.
Correct.
So those were the potential modifications to option C.
And I guess, Lori, should we look at, I know you talked about sort of staff and stuff, and should we evaluate if there would be people we could hire on a part-time basis to do this, this checking? I mean, what it is.
We did talk about that, and just so you know, why we think it's important to have the office staff is, one, they've been heavily trained. They know a lot of the families, and we just feel it would be easier for them to do it, and then to get a sub for them in the office to kind of cover their desk and, do the phones and families that come in, kids that need something. Because many of the buildings have staff members that they use when one or the other secretary or the assistant secretary is out.
I'm just curious,
Yeah.
why would knowing the families be a benefit for doing a residency check?
Well, I mean, I think just from a level of comfort, from an ease of moving through the paperwork, asking any questions, there's just a relationship established, and they really just know how to do this residency thing for the most part, almost with their eyes closed. They're very, very good at it. So we think that would actually expedite, especially if it's an in-person check.
Well, I think option
option.
C is not really an in-person check, it's a drop-off.
But they have to go and they have to check all the documents. I mean, they're gonna have to sit and open envelopes and sort the papers and verify, and then know when they need to do a follow-up, or know when they need to enlist the help of the business department to clarify any tricky paperwork or affidavits or whatnot. We feel like they're the most skilled at doing this and would require the least amount of training to do an important job.
I gotta be honest, I'm kind of struggling with this a little bit here. At first, I was, Dan, I'm kind of leaning that way, right? But John brings up a really good point. What is the subset of people we could possibly catch, and how large is that? And one thing that I was hoping to see in this that I haven't seen is any sense of an estimate of how many people you think it would be. I mean, to do anything, I'd like to see based on my years of experience, I'd expect we'd catch 2 a year. I haven't seen that yet, because I don't know that, and that's a big question for me. The other thing that occurs to me a little bit here is how well, or I guess, if someone can fake it the way they're faking it now, how hard is it to get a few documents faked that'll get past someone who's sorting and going through 3,000 of them, right? I'm gonna guess pretty easy. So the delta between faking it that way and faking it the new way, I don't know how much more protection this adds. I was kind of wondering, professionally, how are these people trained, and precisely what do they know to look for? And can we invest some money, or maybe instead of doing this right away, in better training them for red flags? Or should we, like when you had the corporate crisis a decade ago, every company started to have to do whistleblowing lines, and they started educating employees about whistleblowing and what it was costing and so forth. Is that something which we've never talked about, we should be talking about with the community and saying, this is what it costs, should you be looking out for it? I'm just kind of wondering, it's great that we have another process and we require you to do it every year. And although I understand the cost of the community, John, and I respect it, I also kind of divided it the other way, saying, I've got one kid, it's 2 hours, it's like you raised my fee $20, I can probably live with it. You know what I mean? So as an individual, I was like, it cost me something, but it was somewhat small from that perspective. But I'm kind of thinking, we do all of this, and that's great, but if the actual way we're checking isn't also being improved, if we're not training those people, if we don't have maybe newer and better techniques to try to catch the ones who are faking it, this seems to me to be a lot of busy work that I don't even have an estimate on how much it's going to stop right now. So I'd almost like to see a sidecar proposal that says, and maybe you already have wonderful training, and I'm just ignorant of that fact, but I'm just wondering, should we look at the training, and are there ways to improve it, or ask someone to look at it? Because if we're going to spend any time or money, or people's time out there, which is valuable, I'd like to make sure that we're doing it the absolute best way, where, when you cross a border, and I've driven with my kids, they're asking the kids questions, just silly little questions, but they're looking for something, right? They're looking to see, are they a little edgy, are they whatever, to see, do I take the next step and the next step? Is there something worth training here? Is there even training like that? Those were the questions that, as I went through this, if we're going to do it, then let's do it right. Let's not do it in a way that just makes everyone have a warm blanket around and says, you're checking tenders every year. Let's do it if we're going to do it. You know what I mean?
So Scott, to kind of comment on your comment there, or question is, So, is that scientific evidence? No, but it's my.
And that's great, and that's better than what we got now. My question is, will this process catch them, or are they gonna be able to get around it? And I'm wondering if we ought to look at how we're evaluating and what we're looking at. If we're gonna do this, should this be a real project and not just let's have everyone do busy work one time a year?
Well, maybe in that, I don't want to micromanage this, but, if the evidence is a tax bill for a homeowner, I mean, it's public information. You can punch the tin into the Cook County website, right? And the name will pop up and everything. So if you think somebody's going to falsify that tax bill, that's a public resource we've got available that you could check pretty easily. So that's a good point. I mean,
We're doing the pins with the new property, so, that is a way in which we verify the new property that we have available.
I can only tell you too, I have a 5th grader and a 7th grader, and I have not changed my residence, and the mail has not been dropped back, but I have only turned in documents how many years ago?
Right.
When my 7th
Right.
grader was in kindergarten, I handed the secretary a couple documents.
Right.
So, I'm
not
sure there's
suggesting,
something there.
right, I'm suggesting, does this process catch them? I don't know that I have a warm and fuzzy that just turning in some documents catches the people who can do this. You know what I mean? So that's why I'm wondering, should we investigate or look at, is there a consultant we could just talk to and say, is there some better training program? Is there something? I mean, if we're gonna do it, then let's do it and let's catch the people, because I don't want to spend, I'm with you, Dan. I was suggesting last time, should we get others involved? I mean, my wife's on the PTO, she says, you'd be surprised how many people we suspect because of some goofy thing with a credit card or this or that, and you know what I mean? So if we're gonna really do this, then I say we go all in and we don't just dip our toes in it.
I think for the first year at the very least, you don't know what you don't know. And I think it needs to be done for the first year at least with a process that everybody is reasonably familiar with. Taking what you're saying though, it absolutely is understandable and worthwhile, but I think that it would give you an idea of doing it for 1 year, and then you can massage the system. And maybe since we started talking about this, I've been talking about there's got to be online ways to do some verification. I mean, there's got to be some way to access some data to make this reasonably easier and more bulletproof, more up to the date. I'd like to do this, if you can, the week before school starts, but that's too late to get going. You know that. So I think that, absent redoing the whole process right before school, which would be impossible to do, there's got to be some other way. But I think as we work through the system, it may, and I'm hoping that it may become somewhat self-evident. It may not. But at that point, maybe that's when we pull the trigger and we start, getting some consultant or somebody who might know more about this.
So, I mean, Scott, you bring up a very valid point, but I think, Dr. Hines, like today, you're just looking for guidance on if we're kind of on board for the check or not.
Right.
Maybe step B on this is before you do the verification, you'll use your past experience and also check with other people on the best way to move forward with this, what exact forms you're gonna ask for.
Right, and we have all of that spelled out in terms of, how many we need from category 1, how many we need from category 2, and then they give them a specific, almost like a pull-down list of things that meet the criteria within both of those options. And then I can't speak to the training and how we've trained our secretarial staff because re-verification happened last spring. Do you know, Becky, or anyone, Lori or Bernadette, what that training entails?
Well, I would tell you that my administrative assistant, Peggy Morgan, does probably, during the summer, the majority of the residency verifications. She does talk to secretaries almost daily, and building secretaries almost daily on residency issues. And there's nobody more diligent than Ms. Morgan when it comes to making sure that the people that we've let into this district actually live here.
But do you know how they train the building secretaries?
When we had 2 new building secretaries last summer at Washington and Carpenter, Peggy spent probably a half a day going over residency issues with both of them. They came into the district office and went over that with both of those individuals and gave them how we go with the questions that we ask. And if anything looks suspicious, then they call the business office and they either talk to Peggy. If Peggy can't sort it out, then it's either to Brian, and if Brian can't sort it out, then it's to me.
And do you do the online, like Bob was saying, where you can, if it is a home, where you can pull up the.
We have done that, yes.
You don't do it routinely, though, I take it.
We do it when we think there may be issues with the documents that they brought in. So it's not routine, but we do it when we think it's called for.
Yeah, that's my 2 cents. If we're gonna do this, I wanna make sure we do it, and we do it right. And I wanna make sure it's effective, because I'm not convinced that any of these processes is gonna materially make it harder for individuals who've done this and do this well to get through it.
Says the
So,
technology guy.
huh?
Says the technology.
Says the technology guy. So, there's a part of me saying that, well, if we're gonna just do it to make ourselves feel better, which is somewhat how I feel about this, then I would say, then let's go with the minimally invasive version of it until we actually have gone through. Because I agree, I love that they're trained, right? I wanna make sure they're trained consistently. I wanna make sure they're trained with best practices. I wanna make sure they're trained what to look for. And I fear that you introduce 3,000 of them every year, does it become busy working and loses its effectiveness as opposed to the once a year? So I'm not convinced it's thorough enough at this point, so that's where I'm having my struggles with it, if we're gonna do it.
Good point.
So,
Good point.
okay.
Any,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's good. Any other points? Any other comments? And if not, I'd like to move on to the next item, PIAC and para.
I am almost done. I promise. So, in the fall, you may recall, I talked to you about the principal evaluation and how it started. Last year, it was a new process that aligned with the new Educational Reform Evaluation Initiative. And at the beginning of every year, the principals set goals. They set both goals that align to the ISLIC standards that you've heard me talk about, those standards for professional educators, but they also set student growth goals. So in September and October, I met with the principals and we went over their goals, we went over their data, and then I did a first round of observations. So I observed the principals. It could be leading a faculty meeting, it could be doing a data day, it could be having a pre-conference with the teacher. So all of that takes place in the fall. Now during the winter months, in addition to kind of my walk and talks, which get me into the buildings every other week, and I walk with the principals, I'm able to find out a lot of information about what they're working on informally. I do another round of observations. So that is kind of what I'm in the throes of finishing up right now, that second round of observations. And then we have both pre, just like with teachers, we have the pre and the post conversations. What am I going to see? I observe, and then, what did I see in terms of a post? So it's very similar to what, we're asking of the teachers. Something additional that's happening at this time of year, actually at the end of January into the beginning of February, is principals are completing a self-assessment. And they're assessing themselves in those 6 areas, those 6 standards that are defined by ISLIC. And just to refresh your memory, those standards have to do with the leader's ability to, set a mission and, have a vision for the school and kind of drive towards, reaching the mission and vision. Establishing a positive culture and a system of change within the school system. Teaching and learning. We really want our principals to be focused on, and serving as instructional leaders. Their ability to build collaborative relationships. We're monitoring their level of integrity and professionalism. And then lastly, are they setting kind of high expectations? So they're self-assessing themselves against those 6 standards for professionals, as well as those student growth targets that they've set for themselves. So they're looking at data to see, how is the building doing in the areas that they've identified that they wanted to really focus on improving. Something that the principals are also working on updating right now is the individual Google site. So you will see my Google site during my end of the year evaluation to you, but it is a document that has all of my standard areas within my evaluation and all the evidence or artifacts that supports my progress towards those standards. The principals are doing something very similar this year, and they're updating their sites to include evidence and artifacts that is showing, what progress they're making in those standard areas. So that is happening. And then by the end of February, what I will have done is I will have done the goal setting, finished the observations, checked the sites, And we will have our summative meeting, where I will write a comprehensive evaluation that addresses these kind of 6 standard areas as well as their student growth goal. And then we will have a conversation, fine-tune the instrument, and then that I will then assign a rating. And then that is the meeting that you find out about, kind of not specifically what principal earned what rating, but you'll find out how many of them were distinguished, how many were proficient, where any needs improvement or unsatisfactory. So we're moving along with that process. It's a very busy time for me with the principals. They're doing a similar process with their teachers in the building. So this is a very busy time of year in terms of evaluations, January and into the month of February. So under the new legislation, those timelines have been moved up a little bit. So we have a lot of work to do between now and the end of February. So as I said to you in the fall, I would just make sure to give you brief updates kind of 3 times a year. How did we start the process? Where are we in the middle of the year? And then how will we wrap up? So that was my very brief midway update in terms of my work with the principals and their evaluations. Any questions? Yeah.
I just have one. The 6 criteria, and you may have mentioned this already on other times, but the 6 criteria that are utilized in the self-analysis by the principals, is that the same criteria that you utilize and compare the results? Is that part of the process? Or do you use different
It's the same 6 standards.
Same 6.
Yeah, and in my evaluation, I have these 6 standards, but then we added a few more.
Yeah.
So is that, yeah. So I have the same 6, but we added some more. All right.
Okay.
That's it.
Well, very good job. The next item is the first reading. It's the, wait a minute. According to this, it's the policy, but we have approval, approval of it. But this is approval of policy. Did I skip something? No. I hate this.
You love it.
All righty, so why don't we skip,
Dr.
and
Lopez?
why don't we just follow along with the computer. We have the first reading and approval of policy 6170, so we're going to jump ahead one item to the action item. The board members of the policy committee have the opportunity to have reviewed this, and Dr. Hines, you have some comment.
And I've asked Dr. Lopez and Boyd to come up because they are working with this links to Title I. So they're going to kind of jump in because John and Dathan did have some feedback and they were going to lead a discussion on 6:170.
While you wait for them to set up their presentation, did you have an opportunity to close the loop with Dathan on his comments?
We
on
did
the
not.
policy?
We have not talked to Dathan. So, but Lori's going to address some of those comments, and we may not be ready to approve this at the 2.9 unless I can get him in, or I'm not sure what. But they're going to talk about how this is kind of a time-sensitive policy based on our Title I grant out there. It's kind of hanging out there.
And actually, I don't have a specific presentation for this, John, but just to address the points that you and Dathan both brought up. This particular policy actually has 3 components. It's sort of a standard boilerplate kind of policy that districts adopt when they're applying and implementing Title I funding. And there are 3 parts to it. The first part really focuses on equity. And what it says is sort of the golden rule of Title I, which is we will supplement services using Title I funds, but we won't supplant any services or resources. And so what that means is that as a district, we have a commitment with our own funding to creating equitable services in our schools across the district. But when we receive Title I funding, we'll add additional services to schools that are eligible for it, right? So we can't use Title I funding to equitably serve schools across the district by using district funding for some and Title I grant funding for others. So that's sort of the first part of that policy. The second part has to do with the commitment that we make when we apply for grant funding to parent involvement, and what that looks like at the district level in terms of educating and involving parents and understanding how to support their child's education around the area that we choose to support, and then also at the building level. How will building principals provide leadership around parent involvement? typical activities related to parent involvement include things like parent education programs or providing parents with access to online subscriptions so that they can practice skills at home, providing parent nights where parents could come with their children to look at curricular issues or play games or do things that are associated with the area that you're trying to address. So I think the specific questions, though, that were raised were sort of regarding what's required in terms of parent involvement if we accept Title I funds. What are we committing people to by doing that? Both the parent involvement piece and then our piece as district employees. And then also, is there a way that we could sort of preface this policy by saying something like, in the event that we receive Title I funds? Or would we just keep the policy in, right, when we want to apply and secure Title I funding and take it out when we don't? I think, John, was what you had possibly mentioned.
Yeah, and maybe it would be helpful for the board to back up just a little bit and give a little more background on this. So the policy that we have in front of us is a policy that used to be in our board handbook, and we pulled it from our board handbook relatively recently, within the last 2 years.
2013.
As we were going through, as the policy committee was going through and asking ourselves the question each time we saw a policy, hey, do we really do this? And at the time we did not. We did not apply for Title I, and yet we had a policy that said we would. So in order to bring the policy into line with what we did, we suggested to the board that the board repeal the policy, and the board did. So now we have come around and we've decided we would like to apply for Title I funding. So in order to apply for Title I funding, we need to put the policy back. So that's why you have it in your board notebook today and why it's up for approval. If I remember correctly, I think the version that is in your board notebook is word for word exactly what the policy was before we took it out. So to the extent you're wondering about that, there's nothing new in it. So as part of getting this policy ready to have the board approve it, Lori sent it out to Dathan and I, who were the two policy committee members, and asked for our comments. And Dathan had a few comments. We had a little bit of email back and forth, not fully resolved. And I think some of the things, Lori and Jane, that you guys are able to talk to were some of the things that Dathan had raised. And unfortunately, Dathan's not here this evening. However, I pulled up Dathan's email, and maybe if I can channel him a little bit and ask, and I'm not very good at that, but ask some of the questions he had. I think it might be useful to the board in doing this. And probably the main question he had that I think really is worth everybody on the board hearing the answer to was the question of what specific requirements will the district expose itself to by taking Title I that it is not currently exposed to, and just make sure we all are aware of that before we vote to approve the policy.
As Lori already mentioned, there was that requirement about only supplementing, never supplanting, and we are required to produce a lot of documentation to support that. So there's a lot of grant management that goes into making sure we're completely following that expectation. There are some components that relate to qualifications of staff. In terms of certified staff, we're already meeting the requirement that's within Title I. There are staff certification requirements if we ever use teachers' aides of any kind in the system. We'd have to make sure that they also were held to that higher skill level, higher requirement. When I've checked with Joe, we're very close to that. I don't think it's going to require any changes in our district, but it does hold us to that personnel requirement. And then it's really just the grant management tasks. We had to write a Rising Star plan in order to qualify, and that took a significant amount of time and effort on Lori's part. That part's done. The grant is in its very final details of approval. So it's not so much yes or no, will we get it now? We're through all the big hoops. Now it's I get feedback in the form of, on this line, could you recheck this calculation? We're really to that level of detail. They added money in the last few weeks, which meant I had to recalculate the cells.
We had an additional 48,000 that's in the grant now that wasn't there a month ago. So it's now up to $383,000 for this year, and I would anticipate 48,000 of it is rollover. We're likely to roll over that much again. I would predict it will not go down for next year. I would think if it's going to do anything for next year, it would stay the same or go up.
So this will have a net no cost to the district then?
The way that it's structured, we're spending after we receive. One part, about $50,000 of the grant is homeless expenses. Those are federally mandated that have had to come out of district funds every year. As soon as we're starting to flow the grant, we can move that district expense into the grant. It's the only thing we're allowed to move. Then we do have some math tutoring in the grant, summer programs to address math, because the academic area we've chosen to target with most of the funds is math. But we're not spending until we have it. And the plan for next year will to be spend when we have it.
Do the Title I funds pay for the grant management work that you need to do? Or does that come out of our own funds?
It wouldn't be an additional cost. It would really be coming out of our time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just more to do.
So it's something else that you can't do because you're busy working on the grant for Title I.
Yeah, it's
Well,
what we do in our PJs on
Right,
Saturday morning
Well, it's
with
a
our
little less
devices.
sleep that you get each night because you're working on the Title I thing. All right. The other line of questions that I know Dathan had related to the parental involvement policy that is mentioned in the policy and I guess required by the Title I program. And I think it wasn't clear to Dathan, the policy requires us to have a parental involvement policy. Does it require parents who may receive services under the program to agree to that parental involvement policy? In other words, do they have to agree to something, sign something, or be committed to something for their kids to receive services?
There are three parts of the parent program that I'm aware of. If we had a larger Title I grant, we would be required to set aside funds for our work with parents, those parent nights and other things. The grant isn't large enough yet that we need to move some of the funds over to them. We are required to simply notify parents that their child will be receiving this Title I benefit. It would be a letter. So we're very close to starting some funded after-school tutoring in some of the elementary schools. When the principal tells the family, your child can get free math tutoring after school, the invitation will say, and that's part of the benefits from participating in Title I. It's that notification of to parents. And then we're required to offer things to parents and offer the home computer access and offer the parent nights. There is no requirement that they partake.
Okay. And then his other question related to the parental involvement compact was, if having a parental involvement policy is a good idea for kids who will have something to do with the Title I money, is it something that we ought to be doing for everybody? Should we have kind of a general district-wide parent involvement policy or parent involvement compact that takes the Title I concepts and applies it to all of our kids?
I think it's a really good idea, and we'll let Lori speak to that. Right now, if we could replace the Title I policy in some form and then save that discussion, that would allow us, after all of our work, to start accessing the funds. So if those two things could be separated, that would be great for students.
One of the things I was going to say is we have had a renewed commitment this year to sort of expanding programs like Parent University for that very reason, right? How can we sort of engage people in the bigger conversation around their child's education through education nights? I mean, certainly we're very fortunate in District 64 to have very engaged PTAs, PTOs, right? And parents who I think are very actively committed to supporting their child's education. I think there are opportunities for us to continue to formalize that in the coming years. And Dr. Haynes, I know, is an advocate and supportive of that.
I don't feel it's an area that we don't have a lot of parent involvement, and I think sometimes where you have a more at-risk population, that's why this parental compact is part of sometimes your parents from more socioeconomically disadvantaged communities, for whatever reason, aren't involved. Maybe they can't be at work in some language barrier, who knows. So it's a safeguard to try to make sure you're not just taking the money and then not partnering with parents. I just feel like we have so many opportunities that our parents are partnering with us. I'm willing to, we can have conversations to continue to try to enhance it, but I do really feel in my short time in district that we have so much of this already going on.
And then, Dathan's other question was really about, by adopting this policy, who makes the decision as to apply the Title I? From my read of the policy, the answer that I would give to that is, if this board puts that policy back in place, then the board has decided to pursue Title I, and Lori will be obligated to pursue Title I now and forever until such time as the board once again reviews the policy. So I think, this is an example, if you will, of, the IASB people talk to us about governing by policy. This is a perfect example of that. If we vote for this policy, we are voting to seek Title I funds. If we refuse to put this policy in, there will be no Title I funds. So that, I think, is the extent of Dathan's questions. I was fine with the policy as written. I obviously can't speak for Dathan as to whether he'd be satisfied with the answers, but there you go.
I have one question. Either one of you may answer. Is there any overlap with this with ELL, and can we commingle some of those dollars to get some ELL funding out of this?
In terms of the overt grant overlap, no. If a child happened to be both, so then this would benefit that student if they were both ELL, because the Title I funds really are separate from that. A separate project, we have been looking into how to obtain EL funding, and there was a project that would be due now, and it looks like it's going to be even more complex than this has been. So it's going on to my to-do list for next school year to research that further. But the Title I funds are, just like the Special Ed IDEA funds, very clearly articulated and very clearly managed. So it would more just be if a student was in both groups.
And do you have an idea of how much of an overlap there might be? I'm just trying to, because I know that we're certain dollars right now are allocated to English language learning, ELL secondary language. So I'm thinking that if there's some overlap and we have grants for one, that might encompass that and free up some resources from that other commitment, unless that's abrogated by further grants.
In the world of grant, the words free up are not the words you're allowed to use, because in the world of grants like this one where you can only supplement, there's a lot of systems in place to make sure that anything we ever spend Title I on is always above and beyond, with the exception of the homeless. And then we have to maintain reports that demonstrate that. So if we add a service to an elementary school next year, we will be filling in reports to show we didn't take away from them or move any district funds in response to what we added on.
Gotcha. So it's got to be clean.
It's very clean.
Yeah.
And in some cases, well, in all cases, it can, if you're adding staffing, it can create discrepancy in terms of staffing, right? Because if you're a Title I school, your school will have more resources and more staff to meet what's perceived as a greater need, right? And we can never catch up to make it even by balancing it with district funding, because that would be supplanting. So there's sort of the rub.
So the way it's listed, it says first read and approval. If we're comfortable, we can try to do that. If not, we can, bring it back on the night.
Well, because of the time frame on this, are there any members of the board who have any concerns about this particular policy that was in existence, was removed, now we're bringing it back? And in toto, right, John?
Yes.
All right.
I move that the Board of Education of Community Consolidated School District 64, Park Ridge-Niles, Illinois, approve Board Policy 6:170.
Second.
Why don't we start with Bob?
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Yes.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. The reason why I talked about architect before is I was using the agenda planning outline, which has been updated since.
But since
Sorry.
then, we've realized that we're close with the architectural contracts, but we're not quite there yet. So hopefully what do we have, a 226? 226 is our new target.
Okay. That leads us right up to discussion of Common Core state standards, map testing.
Yes. Well, as the board is aware, we moved to a web-based platform in spring of 2013 for our NWEA map assessment. And we recently learned that the Common Core version of that map assessment was never uploaded from the NWEA system during that transfer as we had thought. So the result is that we have continued to administer the version of the map that is actually aligned to the Illinois Learning Standards, the previous Illinois Learning Standards. So when we learned of this, of course, we contacted NWEA immediately and worked with their regional management and their research departments to do sort of a comparative analysis of the two tests. What impact did they think that this would have on our capacity as a system to sort of move forward with the goals that we had set, and our capacity as a system to sort of look at our data longitudinally. And what NWEA has shared with us is that our scores and our longitudinal data continue to be valid. So one of the interesting things about the two versions of the assessment is that they both use the same norms. And according to NWEA, the Common Core version has sort of evolved by the introduction of Common Core aligned test questions into the Common Core version test bank. So there's significant overlap between the test questions on the two assessments. So because the map assessment is adaptive in nature, students are encountering different types of questions based on what they're answering correctly as they move to the next level. So last year, as you know, was sort of a transitional year of implementation for us. So I was disappointed to learn that we hadn't transitioned over to the Common Core map because I had hoped to measure our approach to full implementation. But what NWEA has told us is that in many ways, it's 6 one way and a half dozen the other. Because when your curriculum is not fully aligned to one set of standards, whether you're using the assessment that's measuring sort of your departure from the Illinois Learning Standards or your movement towards the Common Core standards, shouldn't significantly impact our interpretation of the scores. They have recommended that we migrate to the Common Core version at this winter benchmark, and we've done that. We actually began administering the map assessment last year, and all grade levels will be wrapped up by January 30th. We administered it to all of our 3rd through 5th grade students this year, which we haven't done in the past, and we've continued to administer to our middle school students who scored at the 25th percentile locally, or below that, and so that's about the 40th percentile nationally. So given our board goals and our focus on growth this year, we feel confident that we're going to be able to continue to look at growth over time. I had hoped today to be able to bring you a small analysis of what's happening with our winter benchmarking, but we don't have enough students in the pool yet to be able to look at it very comprehensively. Vicki?
How come for 7th and 8th, it was only the 40th percentile?
That's what we've traditionally done with our 7th and 8th graders, and it's our third.
If a child scored at a certain level, they don't take math till when?
Spring. They take it in the fall and the spring. So in the winter time, we've traditionally only benchmarked our students who are at risk, right? Who might possibly be
junior high.
Yes, in the junior high. And we had done that. Yes, and we actually had done that previously in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade too. But this year we administered to all 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders at the winter benchmark.
So, Lori, when you talked about sort of the 6 1/2 dozen thing, I'm just sort of going back to last summer, I think, maybe, and we were looking at our math test scores, and we knew we implemented the Common expected as an educator, some have had some implementation shortfall, where they drop. As we think about sort of what we now know, are the children who are learning the Common Core curriculum, yet testing against sort of the prior tests, and so they perform worse on that test than children had the prior year. And so, I guess I'm just trying to understand, does that mean that, the Common Core is deficient in some skills being tested? This is the question. This is
I know, it's an interesting question. It's
so
one.
I'm just trying to understand, as we looked at that last summer and thought we understood it, should we be rethinking sort of, what that did, or maybe you can help enlighten us here?
That's a question that the administrative team and I spent an extensive amount of time on the phone with NWA trying to figure out. What their suggestion is that the health of an assessment is based on how aligned that assessment is to your instruction, right? And they said where they see districts experience sort of dips in their scores is when their instruction is in transition and they're not aligned to the test. And so last year, I suspect that regardless of which version of the test we took, the one that was directly aligned to the Illinois Learning Standards or the one that's directly aligned to the Common Core standards, we would have seen a dip in our scores because our instruction wasn't totally aligned to that particular test. And that's what NWA has talked with us about too. They have said that many of their partners, rather than implementing during the transition, right, during the transition to the Common Core standards, have waited until they were fully implemented, knowing that they would see some changes in their scores until they moved to the Common Core version and were fully implemented. But some people have waited and have seen changes in their scores until they transferred over. Does that make sense?
So what would be your expectation, I would think, for this year then? I guess, would you expect the scores to be at the sort of same kind of benchmark, right, at the word
Right.
level, or?
I have a lot of optimism for our scores this year because of the investment that we have put into supporting teachers with interpreting and understanding the data and providing time for people to work together to differentiate instruction for small groups of students. I think our pacing, which was a significant problem last year with the implementation of the new program and people becoming more familiar with the Common Core standards, is getting better this year. I don't know that it's perfect, but I know that for example, our elementary math curriculum specialist, as you know, worked over the summer to create pacing guides for people. And we have throughout the year emailed excerpts from that pacing guide. Here's where the math committee thought we should be about over the summer. Teams, are you there? If you're not there, what support do you need? Here are extra resources that you can use to differentiate instruction for kids. So I think between our professional development and just our experience with the program, I'm optimistic that our scores are going to change. Conversations that we have heard across the district are different than they have been in the past. When you're focusing on growth and you have an assessment that enables you to measure that, it changes what instruction looks like. So I know principals have been in conversations with small teams, not only at their half-day data release at the beginning of the year, but at an early release Wednesday this month, and we'll be again with some teams on our February Institute Day, talking about what their team goal is and what percentage of students are meeting their growth targets. And that will impact our percentile rank for growth, which ultimately was our goal. That was where we sort of saw ourselves lagging at the intermediate level. And that, unfortunately, wasn't a function of the test version. That has been sort of a historical issue at the intermediate grade levels.
Lori, my only concern is that, when we went over to switch from the ISAT to the PARC, there was a significant drop in test scores. Now that we're going to this particular form of the test, yes, I understand what you just said, but I'm anticipating it's a new test, it's a new process, there may be a drop. Is there any need, do you think, of sending out some announcement to parents, letting them know that there's a new testing format? Although we can use the longitudinal data going forward, but they might see some changes?
Related to, are you speaking specifically about MAP or about PARC?
MAP.
About MAP?
Yeah.
We can certainly share information about the Common Core version of the MAP with parents.
Just a heads up,
Yeah.
let them know that it's a new test, new scoring, and there might be some changes, but it's expected and it's all going to be part of their longitudinal data going forward.
The scoring will actually be the same. The norms will be the same. And so they theoretically, according to NWA, shouldn't notice a difference. The longitudinal data should be intact. But one of the things that I can do, we're having a parent university in February, and we're going to be focusing on the PARC, but we can also talk about the relationship between MAP and PARC and just generally testing in District 64 and how we use that information to support students.
Yeah, just my only concern was making families aware that this is different, and there may or may not be a change.
And if I may just thank Dr. Lopez, Mrs. Boyd, Mrs. Ward for the countless hours they were on the phone with NWEA regional group, really trying to get their head around this, pushing the envelope, questioning, making sure that we're in a good place, that we can count this fall assessment as part of our baseline year one. You guys did a tremendous amount of research, and you're our new experts on MAP, so thank you.
Good. Any other comments for Dr. Lopez on this topic? Alrighty, Dr. Lopez, would you want to wrestle?
Sure.
Okay.
No, she has a very sore back tonight. I will not allow it. Her back.
Then perhaps you could lead a discussion on wrestling.
Yeah, that would be much
Okay.
Well, at our last board meeting, I came forward with a proposal related to making wrestling an interscholastic sport beginning next year in the district. As you know, we have had a wrestling team at Emerson Middle School for several years, and there is now interest in expanding that opportunity to include Lincoln students. The wrestling team has evolved at Emerson as a teen leisure club, so much so that it actually looks like an interscholastic sport. And there's some excitement about having it be officially that way, because it would be one of the few sports that 6th, 7th, and 8th graders could participate in, and one of the few sports that is not a cut sport. So if you'd like to participate in wrestling, you can participate in it. We had proposed a fee of $100, and the only lingering question at the board table the last time we met was, could students be responsible for their own, the personal items related to their uniform, like their headgear and their shoes. And that is something that the coach has confirmed would be perfectly fine. So we're back at the board table tonight with that proposal.
The only thing that I didn't see in the packet and that we didn't discuss last time is what is the actual cost going to be with and without stipend, and how much of that is going to be offset by the $100 fee?
The total with stipends for the two coaches and travel and probably the purchase of some singlets for the team would be about $7,000. And I would anticipate probably a $3,300 $3,300 collection of fees for students, and so that would probably leave us at about $37.66 per school. However, some of those students we may not be able to collect a fee from. They may be students who have a fee waiver, so maybe we could conservatively estimate that at about $3,000. So I think that would bring the annual expenses to about $4,000 per team, or about $8,000 per year. We haven't typically in the past sort of looped our coaching stipends into our conversations about expenses for interscholastic sports. So we've sort of thought of that as a compartmentalized item. If we took those coaching stipends out, the fee itself would really cover the cost of the sport.
Yeah, it was my intention about a year and a half ago, to have this very discussion about extracurricular activities and covering the cost of these stipends and such by participation fees. That's probably a discussion for another day, but it's good to hear that at least it's going to cover what has been the historic coverage of about 50% or so. So at least we're right there on target. Yeah.
Will the coaches, the stipend, will that be somewhat equivalent to what coaches in other sports receive?
Mr. Martin actually calculated that based on the number of meets and practices that they have compared to other sports.
Well, as you know, Lori, I think it's great because what I noticed when my child got to junior high is that it was a very different experience based on if you went to Emerson or Lincoln. And I believe that if you're a student at District 64, you should have like opportunities. So I think this is great that you've been able to implement this the short time I've been on the board.
One final thought, basketball, there was concussion protocol. I don't see any mention of mandatory concussion testing or concussion testing, the pre-testing, the baseline testing. In all contact sports, I mean, that's going to be part of this, right?
Yes, wrestling would be part of that.
Okay, good.
All of our interscholastic sports are part of it. And also, I just want to mention that Eric Marks is the coach at Emerson. And it's been Eric's real enthusiasm and passion for wrestling that has enabled this program to expand. So if you see Eric, you can give him a compliment.
You can take him down.
I don't recommend that.
You mess with the bull, you get the horns.
Do we need to, and I know this is a question more for Joel, I know in like our agreement with the PREA that we have, listing of all the things, the stipends the coaches get. Do we need to make some sort of amendment to add this to that, or?
We're working on that stipend list, aren't we, Mr. Martin, to have a real clean list with descriptors and everything? So we
I
will
just don't want anybody to be
Right.
left out because we haven't done some.
Mr. Martin's working on that right now, so we'll make sure wrestling's in there.
Okay. Any other comments? And if not, this is an action item. We'll need a motion and a second.
I move that the Board of Education of Community Consolidated School District 64, Park Ridge-Niles, Illinois, approve wrestling as an interscholastic sport.
Is there,
Again?
thank you, Vicki. Why don't we start on Dan's side?
Aye.
Aye.
Yes.
Aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you.
Or
Next.
will you let the coach know? Let's go.
The next item up is the consent agenda. There's one item in here that, before we get concerned into a motion and second, that is the approve and renewal of the child care with confidence lease. And I'd like to make a proposal that we pull that out and discuss it secondarily and deal with all the consent items separately. So I'll make a motion to do the consent agenda with the exception of the approval for renewal of child care, and then we can discuss that. Is there a second for that?
Sure.
And I guess we'll take a vote on that. So Dan?
Aye.
Aye.
Yeah.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Okay. Now we'll need a motion and a second for the consent agenda as it is, with the approved renewal of child care with confidence lease removed. Anybody want to make that motion?
No.
No, we pulled it out.
He was asking what vote to pull it out.
Yeah.
Okay, I will move that the Board of Education of Community Consolidated School District 64, Park Ridge-Niles, Illinois, approve the consent agenda of January 26, 2015, which includes the personnel report, bills January 14, 2015, bills payroll and benefits January 26, 2015, approval of financial update for the period ending December 31, 2014, approve final calendar for 2015-2016, readoption of 2015-2016 student fees, acceptance of donations, review of closed minutes for review and destruction of audio closed minutes, of which there are none.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Any comments or questions or discussion on any of those items? And if not, why don't we start with Bob?
Aye.
Aye.
Yes.
Aye.
Aye.
All right. That leads us up to the approve the renewal of the child care with confidence lease. We've done this every year in the past. I've never really read the lease, and I did so this time, and I'm going to find it here someplace. Be nice if I had that button and jump forward.
It's on about page 115.
Something like that.
Yeah, it's on.
Way down. I was taken with 2 points in this. Obviously, the first one is that it's a year lease, and the second is that the lease increase is going to be based on the December CPIU, which has now been based at 0.8%. One factor that comes up that is probably beyond the purview of this particular board, with the new board being seated in May, is whether we will continue this program of extended day care, of having this group in here. If we, and you may be very familiar with the litany of emails that Bob had sent out about our current extended day kindergarten and space requirements and such, and what our ultimate plans are going to be for this facility in the future. So when the facility master plan comes out, the next board may decide different uses. So we have a 1-year lease going forward, and that's okay, because the time frame and analysis of the master facility plan is going to take at least that long. But the item number 2, the rental amount will increase annually by the CPIU of 0.8%. And I don't know if that does or does not do the district any justice. I don't know the true value of our real estate. And Scott, maybe you can speak to this because you deal in real estate all the time. If we're renting to a private entity, I don't have a problem with that. But is the cost that we're renting a valid cost? Is it under amount? Is it an over amount? And if it goes up, is it fair to make it go up by that 0.8%? I'm sure that they're raising their fees much more than 0.8%. So what would you, as a real estate individual?
It's a fair question. What I've seen in my time is that escalations on a lease are going to be either set in stone from the very beginning, and the lease will just be perpetuated, where it's 2% bumps every year or something along those lines, or it will default to the CPI index there. The difference, I guess, would be that mine is a for-profit organization. I'm not sure we are, although I agree that we should get fair value for this. Without having comps for what that real estate is worth, it's pretty challenging. I do recall a few years ago when we had the tax issue and we were afraid that we were going to be burdened with the tax thing, which we found out we wouldn't, so it worked out. The community outpouring was the most I've probably ever seen as a board member, even more than the red shirt night. It was really remarkable. And then I guess I would say, that one thing that was evident, and maybe Becky can help me with this a little bit, because she's very involved in this when it occurred. I don't know how much profit they were taking out of it. I think we looked at their financials, and it looked like it was thin. But I do think the comps we had 4 years ago maybe proved that they probably couldn't get this rent anywhere else around this vicinity. So it was, I guess I would guess in my estimate, it was undervalued. We weren't getting our fair value on the rent. Right. That being said, this seemed to me at this time, and I think for the other board members, to be a almost quasi-program of the district, in the sense that so many, and I don't want to say that we sanctioned it, but I'm saying so many community members found this to almost, they didn't see the line between us and them. They thought it was sort of an extension. And so it got very blurry very fast. And we did get vilified by even considering it, even though there was going to be a huge tax burden for the taxpayer because of the property tax. That went away and it seemed to calm itself. So I don't know if that helps the discussion. John, you were there too at the time. I don't know.
Your memory is actually better than mine. I'm glad you took that. But I think that's right. My recollection was that the property probably some talk of perhaps doing something else with Jefferson at the time. The outpouring was tremendous. There were a large number of people who came to our meetings to, demand that we renew that lease. And, we ultimately decided to begin renewing it on a year-by-year basis with the idea that at some point we may want that space within Jefferson for one of our programs. At that point, we would go ahead and terminate it. Since then, I've not seen a proposal to do anything else with that space, and we've continued to work this out year by year. And I assume, Becky, the tax issues are under control these days.
No, they're not.
She is current with paying her taxes since the issue arose in 2010.
Right.
There are still some back years. I think there's 4 back years that she still owes taxes on.
But that's clearly her problem. And
That's
not
her.
our problem.
You're absolutely right. And I understand from Mrs. Fisher that she is still in the appeal process with Cook County, and hopefully she can make it go away. That's her legal battle, not ours.
And my concern right now is not necessarily, I bring it out, the year lease, only as a point of information, because I think that discussion has to be had at some point. My concern right now is the district getting fair value for the amount of the lease and for the proposed lease increase?
And I would say, we need current comps to make a definitive statement, right? We would need to see what market rents are places. A lot's happened in the last year. But based on what I've seen there and my expertise, I would say we're probably not, quite frankly. I don't think we are, but I think we looked at it as sort of subsidizing valuable things in the community to a degree that was indicated. The board didn't seem to have an appetite for canceling the program at that time.
Is this program cost neutral to us?
It's a private enterprise, Dan.
No, but are we forking out money for this?
No.
We're just
We're
not
gonna
giving
get
the
the
money
rent.
amount of rent we should.
But if we don't,
We're not losing money, it's cost neutral to us.
well, I would say that we are losing
We
money.
could be renting out somewhere else.
Sure.
I guess
Or we could
there's
be using it
probably-
for our own services.
Yeah, there's probably a short-term, long-term issue here. If we were to say, these folks are not paying us enough, let's not lease to the next year. If I were a betting person, I would say the space is vacant next year,
Yes.
or it gets a relatively low-value use in the district. Our existing program just kind of has lots of elbow room next year. And so, the thought that we're going to dump these people and get somebody else who's going to pay us a market rent next year is probably unrealistic. Now, if you want to look out a few years and you say these folks are not paying fair market value, we could do something of our own with it. That may very well be true. Or let's look at several years, and if we've got a real estate broker that, help us find somebody new to go, and maybe we could get more money out of them. But there's probably a short-term, long-term issue.
Yeah, I'd say looking at the rent thing, we're talking about $30,000 in a $70 million budget that we have for the district. So I wouldn't spend a lot of time thinking about this as a, big thing from that perspective. And I think that, sort of questions I was interested in, which I don't even know the answer to, and I don't know if Leslie or Lori knows or something is, can we, one of the things is right now is we're not able to accommodate all the people who want to use our extended day kindergarten program. Is this a space that could, because I don't know the answer to that, is this a space that could be used for that program, or is there some aspect of it that doesn't make it, attractive for that reason?
Well, that's why I kind of like the one-year contract.
Right.
So we're figuring out the kindergarten piece. We thought we might get more money from someone else, but then it has for a 3-year contract, and then
Yeah. I like the 1 year, and I'm not even quibbling about the amount, although I think it's underpayment. I am quibbling about the percent increase of 0.8. And I guess, Beck, I don't know how many other districts will rent district facilities out to private enterprises like this.
There are several.
But it can't be a common thing. But, in your discussions, is it a reasonable thing to increase the lease by the CPI, even though the costs to us for heating and air conditioning of this space far exceeds the CPI?
When we issued her a new lease 5 years ago. That was the factor that the board felt comfortable building into the lease. So we would have to go back to the original lease and amend the, in essence, sign the new lease. And
Well, you could put an amendment on this one, couldn't you?
Right. You could,
Yeah.
but again, this is the contract renewal right now, and that's what's in the current lease. And this is the time of year every year that we renew the lease.
That seems kind of funny, because I guess if you put this in there, that it's gonna increase by a certain percentage, then aren't you basically setting what the lease amount will be for the next year?
Right.
So I mean, I don't know if we really, yeah, and if we think we're gonna, you know, so it's kind of like by doing this as is, if we keep them for next year, it seems to me we've already said what the price will be for next year, unless we terminate the agreement.
It requires 6 months' notice to terminate. So.
Yeah, but I mean, so by putting that in here, you say, well, it's gonna go up by 0.8%. To me, that removes any latitude for if you said you're gonna have it for next year, to say, hey, we think your rent should be more. I'd be like, well, but you said it would be 0.8%, so, I don't wanna get into changing that right now or anything, and I think, yeah, we're gonna have a strategic plan, we're gonna talk about, master facility plan, we're gonna talk about how to use our resources. There's a lot of things on the table to consider, full-day kindergarten things and everything, so, but I think, yeah, we should be cognizant, and I think it would be good business practice too, that if, we made a decision not to, continue the relationship, that we give them plenty of advance notice so that they have opportunities. And obviously the community, because obviously I wasn't here for that, but obviously if there was, that was a very big issue that we would certainly want to make sure that, there's the pros and cons of that are pretty well known to everyone.
I'm strongly in agreement with that, because I recall around the same time, we also had our former architect, we were going through a review process, and for their audition, right? For their audition, what we said is, dream up what you would do with that space. And they drew some of the coolest things I've ever seen. It was some of the neatest stuff. It was like, man, if every building could look like that, it would be awesome. And so I think as a board, our direction at the time, and this board will decide what it wants to do or the next one, was, look, we want all day kindergarten at some point, or at least we'd love to get to that. We'd like to, the extended day program. Let's think about that. And I just don't think we've ever found the time to brainstorm on it. So maybe this is the kick in the pants to say, let's maybe spend some time in the next year and brainstorm on it. And, maybe this time next year we're saying this is your last renewal, you'll be gone, because we really have the ability to move things around and go home.
Right.
Or something great like that.
There are many people interested in, that have thrown their hat in the ring for strategic planning, and their platform will be.
All day kindergarten.
Will they-
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah,
But it's
that's,
a fair point, Tony. Are we getting money back? I don't think we are. I don't think we are. Do we need to?
We're providing security, I imagine, heat, water.
Air.
Yeah.
air conditioning, yeah.
Facility repairs.
Legally, Jeff, you might remember this better than I do. I think we just simply said we would increase it by CPI. I don't think the original lease, like this could say 12% and she can sign it or not, and it's 12% next year. I don't think we contractually obligated ourselves for an extended period of time because it's a year-to-year lease.
It could say
Yeah,
anything.
and unfortunately, the only thing that's in the packet is the proposed amendment, and so I don't know what the original lease looks like. I did hear Becky say just a few minutes ago, if I understood it right, that we had a 6-month termination obligation, and if that's correct, we've blown it.
Yeah.
So,
14, 15.
if the price increases in the base lease,
Then-
and it's got a 6-month termination, and we didn't abide by the 6-month termination, then, the question of 0.8 versus something else is probably moot. But, I say that without having read the initial lease, so I don't know.
And maybe we could add this to our summer session.
Well, I think that the full
Yeah.
discussion, I'd like to,
Yeah.
provided that the master facility plan is completed and strategic plan is completed, because this is just a piece that's gonna have to fit in that whole puzzle.
Yeah.
And then this will have to be discussed, because one of the, and I've had people talk to me about all-day kindergarten already in Panera. And the issue.
Casino night.
Yeah, and so the long and the short of it is, we need space, we need people. And people we can deal with, space we can't, unless we have trailers and such, unless we make this the kindergarten. So, I mean, that's one of the options, just one of the options. But anyway, we're getting a little off track because there's some planning to do for down the road, and at some point during your 4 years, I'm sure you will have to grapple with it at some point. So that being the case, now we have a motion to accept this lease. And does anybody want to make that motion in a second?
Sure, I guess I move that the School District Community Consolidated School District 64 Park Ridge-Niles, Illinois, accept the Child Care with Confidence lease as presented in our packet.
And we'll take a vote on Dan's side.
Aye.
No.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. All right, approval of minutes. Let me go back about 100 pages on my computer. I'm looking for that click button. 118. Oh, God.
Oh, no, now it's 119.
All right, approval of minutes. Anybody, I'm sure we've all read them, so anybody want to make a motion? Second?
I move that the Board of Education of Community Consolidated School District 64, Park Ridge-Niles, Illinois, approve the minutes from the special board meeting on January 12, 2015, the regular board meeting on December 15, 2014, and closed session on January 12, 2015, and December 15, 2014.
The second? Starting on Bob.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Yeah.
Aye.
Okay. Liaison report?
Sure. The PTA, PTO president meeting, again, they continue to be a great group, very positive, some of our biggest champions. I reviewed with them the CEC process, strategic planning, the master facility, kind of all the big initiatives that we have. We're going to be embarking on the rest of the winter. We also talked about the hot lunch program and the sneeze guards and the requirement to be in compliance with what the village needs from us because we're serving hot lunch to students. We were able to have one mom volunteer to kind of be the liaison between the hot lunch program and the village representative that inspects us twice a year, Tim Schwartz. So we were able to take care of that. And then I did talk to the PTA, PTO presidents about the possibilities. I think Tony suggested if they would like a board member to come to attend one of their evening meetings, to just be available to each school to ask questions, to kind of share what the board's working on. And they were very receptive to that. So we just have to figure out the best way. You'll have to figure out the best way to communicate with them to get those schedules set up. And if I can help facilitate that process, you can let me know.
I have an interest in reaching out to the PTOs. So if there's any other volunteers, you can certainly put your hat in the ring, but.
Are you going to each take a school, or are you going to volunteer? Like, you guys can work that out, or do you need me just to give you the contact information?
I just need some contact information and set up some dates over the next month or two, preferably before election time.
Or are we going to do it before or after?
I'd like to get a couple in before.
Okay.
I think it would be beneficial.
Okay. Traffic safety was really a quick meeting. I guess it's kind of one of those no news is good news. We didn't have a lot to report. Attendance was kind of fair to Midland, but really it was just a very quick meeting, and we've decided that we're going to do always a before school meeting, and then we're going to probably try to meet 2 or 3 times after that to kind of scale back on some of the meetings. And if we really need anything, if we have concerns, we will just proactively reach out, because there doesn't seem to be a ton on the agenda. So we have to just monitor those. Elementary Learning Foundation, so last Monday there was a meeting. We did talk about Whole Foods. We did that community partner event where we raised about $3,300, or we earned about $3,300. As you know, Whole Foods gave us 5% of their sales for the day. I sent you a picture of some of the celebrity baggers, and it was great fun, and it kind of came together nicely. Then we prepped for casino night, which happened on Saturday. Whole Foods came and actually presented a big check at the event, and we'll include a picture of that in our upcoming community communication. But in terms of ELF and the casino night, it was a great event. It was really something to see how it all came together. I know attendance was down a little bit, but really there was just, a lot of action. I was telling Dr. Borelli it's impressive to see how many staff members attend, and there were some administrators there, really dealing cards and selling raffle tickets, and it's just really a nice way that the community comes together to support the teachers and the students. So we're anxiously awaiting some numbers to find out how profitable it was, but it was a great night. I know I saw Scott and Vicki there, and do you have anything to add about the night?
No, it was great. I think it's just a wonderful opportunity for parents to sit down with teachers and talk a little bit. It's just about silly things. It's not about your kid. It's not about that. You just kind of get to know some of the teachers, and I saw virtually every principal, I think, that was there, and it was, I think it's just such a neat thing.
And then,
Do they know the difference between the bend and the river?
I did have my daughter's art teacher who said this is beginner blackjack, and we all worked together, shuffled cards together, helped her, and everybody was there, and we all lost our money for the kids.
Rep Baldock had me cutting, I was the cutter, and everybody was involved. And then in terms of EdRed, it was tonight, and there was some talk whether we were going to move the meeting or not. As it turned out, Governor Runner wasn't there, but he sent his wife, and what she was going to be talking about was early childhood education. So what I would like to try to do, and you can all remind me, but really I have Madeline on this, so it'll happen. I don't want to schedule the January meeting on this. Typically, I found out it's the third Thursday, or the third Monday rather, because I really would like to be able to attend those EdRed meetings and dinners, and I think it would be great if, all or some of you would attend those. There's a handful of them every year, and, I think it's just a nice time to get together as a board and learn on a topic together. So her focus tonight was early childhood education.
I think we'll just probably have to balance that against it, because we've got Martin Luther King Day is
Right.
thing.
We'll have to figure out the Monday.
First falls,
Yeah.
what
But
day are we meeting?
it's on the radar to find out, if we can save this night, because I think we miss a valuable opportunity to do other work in the board. So that's just, that's my report in terms of EdRed.
And I think too, just to add, I know Tony and I had some communications with Carolyn and Ellen, where I think I'll sort of be the board designated person going forward. I think I was supposed to be, but unaware of that. So I'll be joining that. I know Tony, I think, was also, we offered to go to the January meeting, but yes, given the casino night.
And that was really, that was the large portion of our, it was a long meeting, and it was largely about this.
Yeah, so Bob and I will be at the February Alpha meeting. Yeah. Other discussion items of information?
In an effort for time, there's just a couple that I really just one I want to focus on, because we've talked about the traffic safety. There's a follow-up collection on current student fees. I don't know if Becky has anything on that one, or Scott on Carpenter School, but really and truly Carpenter School, I think we're at the end of the road there. I think we're ready to, again, knock on wood, we're good to go, and we've, I think that building is done.
Actually, I have a question for Scott on Carpenter. I was reading through that list, that lengthy list, and some of the things I didn't understand. They said, oh, here was a problem. We did analysis, and Farnsworth had to recalculate, and it turned out everything was okay. All right.
Mm-hmm.
So I went through a whole bunch of those things, and my eyes rolling backwards in my head. But on page 158, I did find something, and that's the air diffusion is supposed to be at 80%, and it's only calculated to be 40 to 50%. That seems to me to be a significant issue when there's not enough airflow going through those cassettes. So do you know what I'm speaking of?
I'm sorry.
I was going to say, do you know, of all that big listings, are you familiar with that
Yes.
one little nugget?
Yes. The issue with that is that's not actually the VRF system, that's the ERV system, that's the fresh air system that brings the fresh air in. And as part of the design, we used the existing, from the old air handlers in the attic, we used the existing air supply ductwork as a return ductwork. So there is some leaking in that return ductwork, and it's on the exhaust air that's coming back. So within the ductwork, we're not getting the reading, but at the unit, we're exhausting the proper amount of air. So it's a little bit confusing, but the only way that we can do to repair that, to increase that,
is to go in and repair that ductwork. But Farnsworth, Nicholas, Fanning, we've all agreed that there's just no value in doing that. We are exhausting enough of the air out. So it actually is okay, but we do have leakage in that existing duct system, and that's all in the attic. So it's really not an issue.
As long as it's on the exhaust and not the intake side, I'm okay with it.
It's on the exhaust side.
Okay. There was something on page 159, number 4, and were they admitting, I'd have to read it for you if it come up. Let me find it.
I'm sorry, I don't remember.
But I thought I identified something where they admitted a deficiency, a design flaw, and if they did, I mean, it seems to me that there's some kickback for that.
Yeah, and I'm not sure what you're referring to, Tony, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I have to find it for you.
Okay.
And now it's not showing me pages.
Are you in the original Farnsworth report or within?
No, it was
Okay,
right,
okay.
right in this report.
Oh, I'm sorry. What?
It's like an executive summary. On the board back. The one that Scott wrote, the executive summary?
No, the big doohickey here. And I can't see the page number because it's,
For the original basis.
the original basis of the design for the VRF system was not an LG system. However, in the bidding and the submittal process, LG system was submitted as an equal. However, the submitted system fundamentally changed to require hydraulic flows required for the heat pumps from basis of design at 24 GPM to a minimum of 36 GPM to 42 GPM. This was not addressed in the VRF system or pump submittals by either the engineer of record or the installer.
Yes.
Does that imply a design?
No,
flaw?
if you go down and look at the answer to that, it says during the construction, the contractor was instructed to balance the pumps to a minimum of 31 gallons per minute. So basically what happened was we rebalanced the pumps. They're running within the tolerance of the LG system now. So the Mitsubishi system has a different gallon per minute rating than the LG does, but you wouldn't use the Mitsubishi criteria on the LG system. So originally, one of the main things that we thought was a problem was on those, and that's the pump that pumps the water through the system, and we had, they were originally balanced at 24, and that was a little low, but now we have them balanced to the proper standards within the LG design, and that issue has been gone for a long time.
But it stated 42 gallons per minute.
Yes, there's a range.
It's only, there's a range.
There's a range, yeah, 36 to 42, and that was
36,
based on...
42, but it's at 31.
That was based on the Mitsubishi, which was the original design.
But
I know.
Mitsubishi was at 24. See, none of the numbers are
Yeah,
going up.
no, I understand. Yeah, I wish I could give the rest of this explanation here. I'm hoping that they clear it up in that. Basically, the short of it is that originally we weren't getting the water flow, so we weren't creating the heat that we needed. It was lowering the heat down. So now that we've rebalanced the water system and got the pumps to the proper gallon per minute flow based upon LG design, that issue has been gone away for a very long time now. It's no longer been an issue at all.
Okay, so it's
Yeah.
taken care of.
Yes, it is. That in originally that's when we were burning the pumps up. So, but now that we've got everything balanced, everything's running smoothly and it's fine.
And the fact that the LG was substituted for the original Mitsubishi, that was okay.
Absolutely.
And
Well, yes, it was okay, but it didn't work out too good. But by design, yes, it was okay.
okay, and the reason why I don't recall ever seeing some sort of change order and that we were going to change a whole system out.
No, we had on the bid specs we had 3 different manufacturers. We had Mitsubishi, LG, and Daikin. Those were the 3 manufacturers that we would accept, and LG came in on lowest on the bid through F.E. Moran. So it was a specified product at the time.
So right from the
Yes.
get-go. All right. If you say it's okay, it's okay.
I would not lie to you.
No, you wouldn't.
Maybe tomorrow, but not today.
The other thing that I have is school closure. You said that you were going to have a meeting regarding...
It's actually Friday with the North Cliff superintendent.
Yes.
It's this coming Friday. So
Okay.
it hasn't taken place yet. So in one of the February meetings, just so the board knows. Even though we're all in communication with one another, because we have this Uber conference that we use, so everybody can kind of call in and talk about who's thinking of closing and for what reasons. We have it on our North Cook Superintendent agenda for this Friday to talk about who closes and why, and to see if there's a way in which we can standardize some of those decisions across North Cook. And then certainly, members of this township will be there as well. And we've got to see, although we had a lot of nice conversations and we're in agreement most of the time, there were a few of us that were kind of on the fence about some of the decisions and, how tightly do we need to align? Do we have to go as a township or, can we be independent is one of the big questions. And from my first time doing this in the township, there was a level of we really need to go together. If we're all going to go, we're all going to go. If we're all going to open, we're all going to open. And I just think we need to use that time on Friday when there's not the imminent pressure of needing to close kind of bearing down on us to just really debrief the scenario and try to shore up the criteria. Although -25 to -35 below wind chill, it's pretty cold. But we're going to try to standardize some of the procedures if we can.
For what it's worth, one thing that occurred to me is that if there were going to be differences within the township, that there might be an argument for elementary districts being open when the high school district is closed rather than the other way around, given that some older kids have responsibility for babysitting their younger siblings. Just a thought, and I'm not necessarily advocating that you should
Right.
break up as a township, but it was a thought that occurred to me when we were closed, and I was thinking about it.
I have one final thing.
Sure. Nope.
You done?
I just was going to say my other item of information was we've opened 5 essentials. So that's our climate survey. So I will add to one of the upcoming agendas once we have the data. We'll give you a report. I'll
Okay.
figure out the right time to do that, and it'll probably be at that meeting in February, end of February.
And the last item, I promise, we have a meeting on 2/23, 3/23, and 4/4. The final meeting of this board will be May 4th. And per Lori's email, I guess we need to have some sort of agreement that the May 4th be designated as the organizational meeting, unless you guys want to have a special board meeting. And Dan, I know you want to have an extra meeting thrown in there, don't you? So,
I put that in my memo, right, as targeting May 4th?
So,
I'll be at all the meetings in the audience.
so per policy,
Oh, yeah.
per policy, we will need to make that announcement March 23rd, but since it's only 2 weeks later to have I guess that would be April 4th, so May 4th. So we have to make the announcement March 23rd, and that's arguably a month and a half away from the May 4th meeting. So let's plan on the May 4th meeting being the organizational meeting, which means that if we have to do Lori's evaluation and conclude it in this board, we probably will have to do it somewhere. If you want to do it in conjunction with the 4/4 meeting, or if you want to have one extra meeting for a couple of hours, maybe 2 hours, 2.5 hours to complete that evaluation.
And so right now, we only have one April meeting.
We have one April meeting, yes, 4/4. Yeah, and I don't know where spring break goes into that.
Four is a Saturday. I think you're thinking 5/4s maybe.
No, I wrote it down.
Our meetings, we got one on April 13th and April 27th.
Yeah, that sounds right.
I have May,
What on the agenda?
April 27th, yeah.
I think the 13th.
And we have the 13th.
Oh, yeah, there is 2 meetings in April, the 13th and 27th. So do you want to take one of those, or actually what we can do, the evaluation, we can split it up between those two and get it completed over 2 board meetings in April, take an hour close specifically for each of those nights to do that? That way we can tie it right in, we don't have to have a special meeting? Okay. So would you please make provisions, we maybe start at 6 o'clock and have that time to close
I just have on a different topic then, are we ready to move on?
Yeah.
Just one question, and I don't, Becky, if you know the answers, but on the collection of student fees, I was just wondering, now that we've turned over have we turned over the delinquent folks to a collection agency? And so when the collection agency, if they're successful, they receive a certain amount of money for their services. So when we're reporting like the percentage of people that have paid, when the collection agency collects, I guess, I was just wondering how you incorporate that into the reporting, so when you kind of, take off even though we didn't get all of it, do you take off sort of all the amount that family owes, so then we're only focusing on what's outstanding that we could potentially get. And I don't even know then, should we even look at the outstandings down, because, is there any likelihood any of those people are gonna even pay us, or is it just the collection agency now that's likely gonna get the money? And so is our outstanding fee amount actually lower, really, potentially,
Well, typically, when they get the first notice of collection agency, they will quickly pay us.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Not all of them,
Well, the numbers are down dramatically from when we started this, but we're down to 30,000 now, and I just can't understand how people can ignore that responsibility. But it is what it is, and it goes to the collection folks, and they have their credit rating on file. So
Is that our last recourse? I mean, so if somebody, somebody's got someone in third grade, they don't pay the fee this year, they enroll for school next year, there's nothing we can do.
That would be my goal, because I know this is, if I'm not mistaken, the blending of all outstanding receivables. It would be kind of nice to delineate this year versus beyond 1 year, just so we're kind of tracking if this is occurring, because some of these receivables are like 5 years
no,
old.
that 30,000 is this year.
Well, I'm sorry, I thought they were both this and the next.
No, that report is just current, right?
So when do we get the report ready on the other stuff too? Because you were still chasing them, right? You sent them the collection agency. Do we ever get anything back from them? It dribbles in, okay. Okay.
All right, any other questions, concerns, comments? And if not, take a motion to depart.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any disagree? None. We're done. Thank you.